Chapter 470. Master Tam Yuan stared at Chu Xiu. There was no pressure, only calmness. He had met many people overseas and experienced many things, but he could not see through Chu Xiu. It should be said that the human heart was the most difficult thing to see through. Although the jade slip and the comments had proven that Chu Xiu was the one who met the requirements the most, Master Tam Yuan's intuition told him that something was wrong. Chu Xiu did not directly answer Master Tam Yuan. He only said in a deep voice, "Good and evil are only separated by a single thought. Even if I promise you now, I reckon you won't believe me. The path of martial arts is difficult. I can only promise that I will do what I should do in the future." Master Tam Yuan nodded. Chu Xiu's words made him feel at ease. If Chu Xiu patted his chest and said that he would definitely do good and save people in the future, Master Tam Yuan would not believe him. He had stayed in the East Sea for a long time, and had seen many things like human nature being evil. If Chu Xiu pretended to be too hypocritical, it would be very easy for Master Tam Yuan to see through him. Looking at Chu Xiu, Master Tam Yuan said in a deep voice, "I just hope that I didn't make the wrong choice with my cultivation. Chu, don't disappoint this old monk. Now that I have begun the cultivation transfer, I have decided to disperse all my cultivation. A part of it will return to the world. I can't collect this part of the power, so I can only let it drift away. However, I still have a part of extremely pure power that I can inject into your body, Chu, to help you take a step forward. Therefore, you have to be ready later. Empty your mind and prepare to receive my power. Don't worry, this is an extremely pure power. It doesn't contain any impurities, and the amount won't be too great. At the very least, with the strength of your physical body, you can completely control it." After a pause, Master Tam Yuan continued, "I've learned a lot of things in my life. I was born in a small temple, and the cultivation techniques I've learned aren't very powerful. I reckon you won't be interested in them. Later on, I obtained quite a number of cultivation techniques in the East Sea. There are strong and weak ones among them. Therefore, I only plan to teach you 2 martial arts. One of them is an ancient cultivation technique that I accidentally found in the East Sea. There are even traces of Tantric Buddhism in it. However, I saw that its power is not weak, so I cultivated it. This cultivation technique is called the sun-shifting technique. The great sun-changing art was derived from the meaning of stealing the heavens and changing the sun. It could seize the fortune of heaven and earth and fuse it into one's body, unleashing one's potential to the extreme. However, its might was powerful, and it was easy to injure others and oneself. The sun of the sun-shifting technique also has the meaning of Vairocana. Changing the sun is to exchange one's state of mind with Vairocana. Therefore, whether your body can withstand the power of Vairocana will depend on you. As for the second technique that I'm going to impart to you, it's the formless sealing palm imprint that I created by gathering countless Buddhist techniques. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. When the formless sealing palm is cultivated to the extreme, the 5 skandhas are all emptiness. Life and death gather in the palm, evolving into the myriad worlds of heaven and earth, changing constantly. When speaking of the formless sealing palm, even Master Tam Yuan couldn't help but reveal a hint of pride in his tone. Although the sun-shifting palm was also his main cultivation technique, it was written by predecessors. Even if he learned it, there was nothing to be proud of. On the other hand, the formless sealing palm was created by Master Tam Yuan himself. In Master Tam Yuan's opinion, it was the condensation of his lifelong martial Tao. Master Tam Yuan put his palms together, and his body emitted spots of Buddhist light. He said in a deep voice, "Chu, empty your mind. When I transmit these powers to you, the sun-shifting technique and the formless sealing palm will also enter your mind. It also contains some of my cultivation experience, allowing you to skip the cultivation stage after obtaining these 2 cultivation techniques, and be able to use them instantly. However, it's something that you didn't cultivate on your own, so its peak is limited. The experience I give you doesn't belong to you, so it can only help you evolve 80% of the charm of the cultivation technique. If you want to walk your own Tao, you still have to rely on yourself." As the Buddhist light around Master Tam Yuan became more and more intense, the light also surged into Chu Xiu's body. This instantly added a lot of things to his mind. and he also felt like his body was about to explode. However, the power really entered Chu Xiu's body, as Master Tam Yuan said, causing Chu Xiu to instantly feel as if he had entered another realm. The biggest difference between the unity of heaven and man and the five qis unification was that the power that could be mobilized was different. No matter how strong the five qis unification was, it could only mobilize one's own power. At the unity of heaven and man realm, one's own power had already faintly merged with heaven and earth. When one attacked, one could naturally borrow a trace of the power of heaven and earth. Even if it was just a trace, the power was shocking enough. Of course, whether the borrowed power was strong or not depended on how strong one's understanding of the power, and how strong one's control over the power. Otherwise, no matter how much power one borrowed, one would not be able to control it and would only be a waste. At this moment, Chu Xiu was already immersed in a very strange state. Half of his mental power seemed to be in his body, and the other half was in heaven and earth. As the two gradually merged, Chu Xiu suddenly opened his eyes. It was as if he had stepped into another world. In such a short time, he had actually stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. In fact, Chu Xiu already had a vague premonition of stepping into the unity of heaven and man realm. However, at that time, Chu Xiu was still lacking an opportunity. Now Master Tam Yuan had given him this opportunity. Finally, Chu Xiu could successfully step into this realm, and the process of breaking through could be said to be without any obstacles. This could be attributed to Chu Xiu's stable foundation and deep accumulation. It could also be said that Master Tam Yuan's power was too strong. He was so strong that he had given Chu Xiu so many things without saying a word. However, it was not over yet. Chu Xiu was far from happy. Master Tam Yuan's sun-changing technique and formless sealing palm had not been imparted yet. Compared to the previous power, these two techniques were more important. Therefore, Chu Xiu still did not move. Instead, he directly opened up his mind, allowing the words and Master Tam Yuan's experience to be poured into Chu Xiu's mind. In fact, Master Tam Yuan's actions were very similar to the tantric sex enlightenment technique. It could create an expert at an extremely fast speed. The sun-changing technique had a trace of the tantric sex aura, and it was not surprising that Master Tam Yuan used a technique similar to the tantric sex enlightenment technique. However, Master Tam Yuan imparted everything he knew without reservation, which was a huge damage to his mental power. Now that Master Tam Yuan was nearing the end of his lifespan and was on the verge of death, he felt at ease using this method to pass down his techniques. Meanwhile, over 10 miles away from Dragon Beach, Zhongxian had already started to return to the Great Light Temple. At that moment, a monk in white clothes in his 40s ran over hurriedly from afar. When he saw Zhongxian, his eyes lit up, and he quickly ran over and said, "Martial nephew Zhongxian, have you seen Master Tam Yuan?" Zhongxian looked at the monk in white clothes, put his palms together, and said, "Greetings, Martial Uncle Mingqi. I've seen Master Tam Yuan, but he refused to come to our Great Light Temple." "Where's Master Tam Yuan now?" Mingqi quickly asked. Zhongxian said, "Master Tam Yuan chose Chu Xiu to be his successor. He's currently imparting his techniques in the inn outside Dragon Beach." Mingqi slapped his thigh and shouted, "Oh no! I was still a step too late." Master Su Jing deduced that Master Tam Yuan wants to leave his techniques in the Central Plains. If our Great Light Temple can obtain Master Tam Yuan's inheritance, we can successfully obtain Master Tam Yuan's reputation. We can even use this reputation to go to the East Sea to preach. How can you let Master Tam Yuan impart his techniques to someone else while you're there? And it's even Chu Xiu. The Great Light Temple had 3 major Zen halls and 6 major martial academies. Among them, the 3 major Zen halls had the least number of people, but they were the strongest. The Karma Meditation Hall did not focus on martial arts, but the Karma secret techniques of the Buddhist sect. Its master, Venerable Maitreya, Su Jing, was comparable to the divination masters of Taoism in terms of divination and karma deduction. The Maitreya Buddha was the future Buddha, and Su Jing's nickname was Venerable Maitreya. One could imagine how strong his attainments in the karma path were. Moreover, even Abbot Su Ci had to consult Su Jing for most of the Great Light Temple's decisions, and let him deduce them before making a decision. Although this could not ensure that the Great Light Temple would never make a mistake, it could reduce the error rate to the minimum. This time, it was the same to welcome Master Tam Yuan. After deducing that Master Tam Yuan was preparing to leave behind his inheritance, Su Jing immediately had an idea. The Great Light Temple did not care about Master Tam Yuan's inheritance, but the Great Light Temple cared about Master Tam Yuan's reputation. Master Tam Yuan had already laid the foundation in the East Sea. At this time, if someone from the Great Light Temple went to the East Sea as Master Tam Yuan's successor, then the pressure of preaching would undoubtedly be very low. Therefore, Su Ci immediately sent Ming Qi over to remind Zhong Xian of this matter. Ming Qi was not very anxious at first. After all, in his opinion, even if Master Tam Yuan wanted to leave behind his inheritance, he would definitely leave it to Zhong Xian. Among the Buddhist martial arts practitioners present to welcome Master Tam Yuan, the old monks of the Subodhi monastery were about the same age as Master Tam Yuan. As for the other Buddhist martial arts practitioners, how could they compare to Zhong Xian? In the end, who would have thought that in the end, not only did Master Tam Yuan not give his inheritance to Zhong Xian, but he gave it to Chu Xiu, who was not a Buddhist. Compared to the anxious Ming Qi, Zhong Xian was still calm. He just said lightly, "Abbot did not tell me that I must obtain Master Tam Yuan's inheritance. Why can't I watch?" Chapter 471. Ming Qi was rendered speechless by Zhong Xian's words. He did not know what to say. With Zhong Xian's personality, not only in the outside world, but also in the Great Light Temple, Zhong Xian could complete all the tasks given by the elders in the sect perfectly. However, as long as it was not part of the task, Zhong Xian would not even look at it even if the sky fell. Ming Qi did not know what to say to such a person. In any case, Zhong Xian's strength was obvious. No matter how eccentric Zhong Xian's personality was, his strength alone was enough to make him the successor of the Great Light Temple. Buddhist techniques were not meant to be mastered quickly, and the Great Light Temple's techniques placed the most emphasis on the foundation. However, Zhong Xian was able to reach the oneness of heaven and man realm before he was 30 years old, and his combat strength was close to the level of a martial Tao master. Such strength was extremely rare in the entire history of the Great Light Temple. At that moment, Fang Qishao also walked out of the small town outside the Dragon Beach with a pot of yellow wine in his hand. He looked like a sloppy person. Previously, he drank half a pot of yellow wine from Chu Xiu. Sword King City was located in the western region, and while the grape wine there was very famous, there was no yellow wine there. After tasting it, 7th young Master Fang was surprised to find that it tasted pretty good. He then filled a pot and prepared to leave. After all, he was already here. Now that he had shown up and made his presence known, his mission in Sword King City could be considered completed. At that moment, Fang Qishao also saw Zhong Xian and Ming Qi on the side of the road. He could not help but raise his head and snort coldly. Then he used the long sword in his hand to carry the wine pot, and walked in another direction. Ming Qi suddenly felt a little comforted when he saw Fang Qishao like this. Compared to Fang Qishao, Zhong Xian was considered more normal. At the very least, they did not have to worry about the sect's reputation being shamed. If the people of Sword King City knew that Fang Qishao behaved like this, and did not have the aura of a young elite or the successor of Sword King City, they would probably go crazy with anger. However, Ming Qi didn't know that the people of Sword King City wouldn't go crazy, because they were used to Fang Qishao's behavior. At this time, Ming Qi suddenly slapped his head. Now was not the time to think about these useless things. He hurriedly pulled Zhong Xian and said, "Martial nephew Zhong Xian, quickly go back. It might not be too late to stop Master Tam Yuan." The expression on Zhong Xian's face did not change as he allowed Ming Qi to pull him towards the small town of Dragon Beach. For Zhong Xian, these things didn't matter. Ming Qi came from the Karma Zen Hall, so his combat strength was inferior to him. However, because Ming Qi's seniority was higher than his, he was his martial uncle. Now that Ming Qi was preparing to organize Tan Yuan to pass on his cultivation to Chu Xiu, he would follow suit. Looking at the two figures, Fang Qishao's eyes showed a trace of doubt. He bit the mouth of the wine flask, took a big gulp, and followed behind them. Fang Qixiao was just bored and wanted to watch the show. His karma sword Dao was about comprehension, not practice. Therefore, for Fang Qixiao, a long period of closed-door cultivation didn't have much effect on improving his cultivation except for accumulating his internal force. Therefore, the seventh young master Fang spent most of his time wandering outside instead of cultivating in seclusion within the sect. Now that his realm was the same as Zhongxian's, he was close to becoming a martial Dao grandmaster, so he needed an epiphany. Therefore, he had been wandering around the Jianghu during this period. Now that he saw Zhongxian's actions, Fang Qixiao's intuition told him that there must be a show to watch, so he immediately followed them. At this time, at the entrance of the small town's inn, Long Tianying and several Cetacean Society revered elders were guarding the entrance, protecting Master Tam Yuan. Although Long Tianying was a businessman, he also knew what kindness and morality were. If it weren't for Master Tam Yuan's help in the past, his Cetacean Society would have been annexed by the three evil islands. How could it still have its current glory? Moreover, Long Tianying was not a martial Dao grandmaster himself. It was very difficult for a Chamber of Commerce to recruit a martial Dao grandmaster level guest revered elder. It was precisely because of Master Tam Yuan's words that the Cetacean Society did not make things difficult for people in Donghai, and could develop to its current scale. Now that Master Tam Yuan was about to pass away, Long Tianying also wanted to send Master Tam Yuan on his last journey to fulfill his last wish. At this time, the crowd outside to watch the show was suddenly separated, and Zhongxian and Mingqi hurried over. Everyone present was stunned. What was Zhongxian planning to do when he returned? That monk in white was also from the Great Light Temple? Mingqi walked in front of Long Tianying and said, "I'm Mingqi from the Karma Meditation Hall of the Great Light Temple. I would like to see Master Tam Yuan. Please make way." Long Tianying frowned slightly and said, "Master Tam Yuan is currently imparting his skills. Please wait for a moment, Master Mingqi." Mingqi immediately said, "It's precisely because of this that I want to see Master Tam Yuan. Chu Xiu has a bad reputation in the pugilistic world. He has committed all sorts of evil deeds, and has a huge grudge against the Buddhist sections. We must not impart our skills to such an evil thief. Let me in. I'll definitely persuade Master Tam Yuan to rescind his order." Long Tianying's eyes revealed a hint of disdain when he heard that. Although he was indebted to Master Tam Yuan, in reality, Long Tianying did not have a good impression of monks, especially Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Zen Monastery, the two leaders of the Buddhist sections. In the past, when the East Sea was filled with chaos and slaughter, why didn't you all come to save us? It was only now that Master Tam Yuan's name has spread throughout the pugilistic world that you all came to welcome him. Master Tam Yuan was Master Tam Yuan, and the other monks were other monks. Long Tianying was very clear on this point. Therefore Long Tianying shook his head and said, "I'm sorry. Master Tam Yuan has ordered that no one is allowed to enter when he's imparting skills. Moreover, Chu Xiu was personally chosen by Master Tam Yuan as his successor. Be it Great Light Temple or Sabodhi Zen Monastery, they shouldn't have the right to interfere." Mingqi's expression turned cold when he heard that. He snorted and said, "It's up to Master Tam Yuan whether he agrees or not. Get out of the way. I'll explain it to Master Tam Yuan personally." In front of Zhongxian, Mingqi's attitude was very amiable. He did not put on any airs of a senior or master at all. But in reality, Mingqi was an elite disciple of the Karma Zen Hall, someone who would be heavily nurtured in the future. His status in the entire Great Light Temple was not low. Long Tianying was the leader of an overseas chamber of commerce. Normally, Mingqi would not even be bothered with him. Why would he listen to his argument now? Seeing Mingqi's attitude, Long Tianying shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, I won't let you in. Master Tam Yuan cannot be disturbed when he's imparting skills. As long as I'm here, no one can step into this inn. You're so stubborn." Mingqi snorted and slammed his palm at Long Tianying. In an instant, a seven-colored Buddha's light bloomed and was extremely dazzling. However, Long Tianying was not afraid at all. The gangqi around his body condensed into one. Like a tsunami, he punched out with a loud bang. The wind broke through the waves, and its power was boundless. As the leader of the Cetacean Society, It was impossible for Long Tianying to only be in the realm and not have any combat power. It should be known that he had built the Cetacean Society from scratch. In the beginning, he had fought with many people, so Long Tianying's combat power was not bad. He was actually evenly matched with Ming Qi. Of course, this did not mean that Long Tianying's strength was strong enough to compete with the martial artists of the Great Light Temple, but Ming Qi was a special case. He came from the Karma Zen Hall and majored in the Karma Zen Hall's secret future incarnation scripture. This technique was mainly about karma deduction and cultivating the state of mind. Although it was also helpful for one's own combat power, to exert its true power, one must wait until the realm of the martial Tao Grandmaster. The current Ming Qi was too far behind, so he was tied with Long Tianying. If it were the monks of the Vajra Hall or the Dharma Hall, it was estimated that it would be very easy to deal with Long Tianying. Seeing that he could not take down Long Tianying, and Zhongxian next to him was like a statue, Ming Qi was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. This Zhongxian had no foresight at all. Seeing that he could not take down Long Tianying, would he not make a move? Did he have to shout it out and make it so embarrassing? In fact, Zhongxian was really ready to make a move, but not now. It was when Ming Qi was in danger. In Zhongxian's way of thinking, Ming Qi was his martial uncle. If he was beaten to the point of vomiting blood and being injured, he should make a move. However, he was still fighting with others and it was very lively. If no one spoke in this situation, Zhongxian would not be a busybody. However, at the moment, Ming Qi really had no way to deal with Long Tianying. He could only shout, "Zhongxian, come and help me." As soon as these words were spoken, Ming Qi heard the discussions of the surrounding martial artists. They were all saying that he was useless. As a master's uncle, he actually had to ask for a disciple's nephew's help. Furthermore, a martial artist from the Great Light Temple actually had to fight one against two. It was really too degrading. However, at the moment, Ming Qi just wanted to stop Master Tam Yuan from passing on his skills. He could not care so much. At this time, Zhongxian had already made a move. Taking a step out in an instant, Long Tianying felt dark clouds covering his head as if a storm was coming. A thick pressure had completely surrounded him. This change immediately made Long Tianying's expression change. Was the existence of the second on the Longhu leaderboard really so terrifying? This kind of aura was already comparable to a martial Tao Grandmaster. In fact, even in some martial Tao Grandmasters, Long Tianying had not felt such a terrifying aura like Zhongxian's. A Wisdom King seal fell. It was a simple Wisdom King seal, but it suppressed everything. It was as if everything in this world would be completely torn apart and crushed into nothingness under this Wisdom King seal. Long Tianying shouted angrily and took a deep breath. In an instant, an endless amount of heaven and earth yuan qi was swallowed into his stomach. Then it merged with his own earth energy and suddenly exploded, forming a huge vortex-like cyclone that blasted towards Zhongxian. World engulfing. However, this move of Long Tianying could not even block Zhongxian for a breath's time. In an instant, the cyclone shattered and the earth energy was extinguished. Long Tianying was directly blown away by this seal and vomited blood. Chapter 472. They were both at the oneness of heaven and man realm, but Ming Qi and Long Tianying were evenly matched. Now that it was Zhongxian's turn, Ming Qi could not even withstand one move, which showed how big the gap was. Long Tianying was also shocked. This was the first time he fought with a young talent on the Longhu list. Putting others aside, this Zhongxian was definitely a monster, even more terrifying than some martial arts masters. Go. Block the door. Don't let anyone in to disturb Master Tam Yuan. Long Tianying shouted at the other Cetacean Society guest chamberlains. Those martial artists at the oneness of heaven and man realm did not hesitate. Even in the face of Zhongxian, an expert who was famous in the underworld and even seriously injured Long Tianying in one move, they did not hesitate to rush forward. It had to be said that the quality of these guest chamberlains recruited by Long Tianying was quite high. These people were all well-known martial artists in the East Sea. After they were recruited into the Cetacean Society, Long Tianying treated them like brothers and generously recruited them. So now at this critical moment, These guest chamberlains were willing to fight with their lives for Long Tianying. Zhongxian was expressionless, but his hands did not stop at all. All kinds of bright king seals fell, and none of the martial artists at the oneness of heaven and man realm present could withstand one move from him. All of them were seriously injured and vomited blood by his seal. And as the fight went on, everyone could see that Zhongxian did not want to kill people. He still held back. Otherwise, some of the weaker martial artists in the Cetacean Society were likely to be directly killed by his bright king seal. At this time, in the room, Master Tam Yuan had completely passed on all his power and cultivation method to Chu Xiu. After the inheritance, although Master Tam Yuan did not die, and his appearance did not change much, Chu Xiu sensed an aura from him, an aura of decay. Master Tam Yuan was almost at the end of his rope. Chu Xiu stood up and bowed to Master Tam Yuan. "Thank you, Master." This Xie Chu Xiu was from the bottom of his heart. After all, although he had obtained his strength and inheritance through deception, it could be said that Master Tam Yuan had willingly given it to him. Master Tam Yuan reluctantly waved his hand and said, "My last wish has been fulfilled. My purpose in returning to the Central Plains has been fulfilled. My mind is clear, and I no longer have any thoughts. I should be the one thanking you, Chu." Chu Xiu remained silent. Sometimes it was better for people to be muddle-headed. If they saw everything too clearly, they would have many regrets. At this time, Chu Xiu looked outside the inn and said, "Master, how should we deal with the people from the Great Light Temple?" When they were imparting their cultivation methods, Chu Xiu and Master Tam Yuan had already noticed the commotion below. However, they were at a crucial moment and could not be disturbed. Therefore, they did not show up. Master Tam Yuan sighed when he heard that. "Back when I didn't go to the East Sea, there were only 2 sacred grounds of the Buddhist sects for all the Buddhist disciples in the world. One was the Great Light Temple of the Northern Buddhist sect, and the other was the Subodhi Monastery of the Southern Buddhist sect. Because of the cultivation method I cultivate, I've always treated the Great Light Temple as the sacred ground in my heart. I've always dreamed of going to the Great Light Temple. However, as time passed, this desire became weaker and weaker. In the end, I no longer had any interest in going to the Great Light Temple. Under the bright Buddhist light, there is no room for any darkness. I don't know when it started, but the Great Light Temple has changed. They've become extreme and arrogant. They only care about strengthening their Buddhist light, so that the light can suppress more darkness. However, they've never thought about how to completely find the source of the darkness instead of blindly suppressing it." Seeing the sacred ground of the Buddhist sects in the past, the place of his dreams, turn into such a state that was filled with interests and schemes, Master Tam Yuan could not help but sigh in his heart. Chu Xiu was not as emotional as Master Tam Yuan. He merely said calmly, "Master, there's one thing you're wrong about. If there's no darkness, how can there be light? Everything needs to be compared. Perhaps the Great Light Temple itself does not want this darkness to be completely destroyed." Master Tam Yuan was stunned. What Chu Xiu said made some sense, but it was a little too extreme. Although Master Tam Yuan felt that the Great Light Temple's actions were a little too realistic, the other party should not be that dark. Sighing again, Master Tam Yuan said, "Chu, go and settle the rest. I can't fight anymore and I can't stop them." Chu Xiu nodded and walked straight out the door. Meanwhile, below, the Cetacean Society guests that Long Tianying had brought with him did not last long. They were already heavily injured and defeated by Zhongxian. Almost all of them had lost their ability to fight. Seeing that Zhongxian and Mingqi were about to step into the inn, Long Tianying forced himself to stand up and stood in front of the 2 of them. This time, even the onlookers were a little surprised. This Long Tianying was really something. At this time, he still dared to stand in front of Zhongxian and Mingqi. Was this person really not afraid of death? Zhongxian said calmly, "Move aside." Long Tianying clenched his teeth and shook his head. "The Great Light Temple is so overbearing. Aren't you afraid of attracting criticism?" Mingqi frowned and snorted. "Overbearing." Since the Great Light Temple is the leader of the Buddhist sects, we can't just watch as our Buddhist martial arts fall into the hands of outsiders. Don't forget, you're just an outsider. Since you don't know how to appreciate kindness, then don't blame me for being ruthless. As soon as he finished speaking, Ming-Chi immediately prepared to make a move and finish off Long Tianying completely. The Great Light Temple had never been afraid of outsiders calling them overbearing. This was because the way the Great Light Temple did things was already very overbearing. They did not care what others said. However, just as he was about to make a move, a flash of a knife roared out from inside the inn. As the flash of the knife approached, boundless demonic energy mixed with the power of blood suddenly descended. The powerful demonic energy from the knife swept across dozens of feet, and even enveloped the entire long street. The knife slashed down, and a murderous intent rose. As the knife slashed down, Ming-Chi could even faintly hear the cries of evil spirits. It was abnormally horrifying. With such terrifying demonic energy, if Ming-Chi did not know who was inside, he would even suspect that there was a peerless demon living inside. Raising both palms, an endless Buddhist light bloomed. However, under the demonic knife, the Buddhist light was easily extinguished, just like how Zhongxian had crushed Long Tianying with ease. Just as Ming-Chi was about to be killed by the knife, Zhongxian also moved. The sound of Buddhist chanting came from all around him. His body, which seemed to be cast from steel, now bloomed with an even more dazzling golden Buddhist light. A seal blasted out. Vajra subduing demons, shattering mountains and rivers. Guardian Deity Seal. With a loud bang, Zhongxian directly stood in front of Ming-Chi, and used the Guardian Deity Seal to block Chu Xiu's knife. As the powerful Gang Qi dispersed, a deep white mark was left on Zhongxian's palm. However, strangely, there was no blood flowing out. Chu Xiu walked out of the inn with his knife in hand. His black robes fluttered in the wind that had yet to dissipate. At this moment, the aura around his body was in harmony with the heavens and the earth, looking extremely mysterious. Everyone could also see that Chu Xiu had already stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. Previously, when the martial arts practitioners in the underworld talked about the Longhu leaderboard, they would discuss the top 5 and the top 10 and so on. After all, to most people, only the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard could be said to be on the same level. This was because those who could be ranked in the top 5 were all existences in the unity of heaven and man realm. Now that Chu Xiu had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, they would probably not be discussing the top 5, but the top 6. Looking at Ming-Chi and Zhongxian, Chu Xiu laughed coldly and said, "In terms of strength, Master Tam Yuan has already passed it on to me. I have also learned the techniques. Why? Now that the Great Light Temple has an opinion, do you still want to go back? What a joke! Master Tam Yuan is Master Tam Yuan, and the Great Light Temple is the Great Light Temple. What right do you have to interfere with Master Tam Yuan's decision? Isn't the Great Light Temple being a little too involved? Do you really think that you are the leader of the Buddhist sects in the world, and that all the martial arts practitioners in the Buddhist sects have to listen to the Great Light Temple?" As these words were said, many of the Buddhist martial arts practitioners present felt a little unnatural. The Buddhist sects in the world respected the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Zen Monastery. Everyone knew this, and they had always done so. However, being respected was being respected. What the Great Light Temple did today was indeed a little overbearing. Although they did not approve of Master Tam Yuan passing down the techniques to Chu Xiu, Master Tam Yuan was a holy monk recognized by the entire underworld. His status was not lower than the Great Light Temple's. Even if Master Tam Yuan was planning to pass down the techniques to Chu Xiu, even if he was planning to pass down the techniques to the remnants of the demonic cult, the others would not be able to say anything. Now that the Great Light Temple had such an attitude towards Master Tam Yuan, what would they do if something happened in the future? This made everyone present feel a little uncomfortable. Ming-Chi frowned. He suddenly realized that he did not have the slightest advantage when it came to arguing with Chu Xiu. This guy's ability to invert right and wrong and pester people endlessly was not inferior to his strength. Ming-Chi was targeting him. But now that Chu Xiu had said this, it became the Great Light Temple that was extremely overbearing and targeting Master Tam Yuan. Therefore, Ming-Chi rationally did not want to waste any more time with Chu Xiu. He said coldly to Zhongxian, "Zhongxian, do it." This Chu Xiu used some unknown method to deceive Master Tam Yuan and obtain the inheritance. Our great light temple cannot sit back and watch Master Tam Yuan's inheritance fall into the hands of such a despicable person. Even if you have the inheritance, you must hand it over now. Ming Qi knew about the grudge between Chu Xiu and the Great Light Temple in the past. In the end, it was Su Yun, the master of Karma Zen Hall, who spoke up to settle it. However, Ming Qi did not care about Su Yun's words. Although the Karma Zen Hall's strength was not as strong as Karma Zen Hall, its status was more important than Karma Zen Hall. Karma Zen Hall's strength was only because of its master, Su Yun, while the Karma Zen Hall's importance to the Great Light Temple was because of the Karma Zen Hall itself. Chapter 473. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and looked at Zhong Xian. He did not expect that he would have to fight with Zhong Xian again so soon. In fact, although Ming Qi from the Great Light Temple was overbearing, what he said was true. Chu Xiu's power inheritance was obtained through deception. However, with Chu Xiu's character, how could he spit out the things that entered his mouth? He did not have such a habit. Therefore, this battle was inevitable and Chu Xiu was willing to accompany him. Chu Xiu had just stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. Normally, he would need to retreat for a period of time to familiarize himself with his realm. However, for the current Chu Xiu, it was much faster to familiarize himself with his realm when fighting with someone than when he was in seclusion. Especially when his opponent was Zhong Xian, the same Zhong Xian who had previously given Chu Xiu a lot of pressure. On the other side, Zhong Xian paused after hearing Ming Qi's words. However, he also stood up. In fact, Zhong Xian did not want to fight because it was meaningless. Zhong Xian's character was more stubborn, but he was not an idiot. He could think. In front of so many people, Master Tam Yuan had already passed on his power and cultivation technique to Chu Xiu. Even if they forced Chu Xiu to hand over the cultivation technique, what was the use? What the Great Light Temple really wanted was not the cultivation technique, but Master Tam Yuan's reputation. Therefore, if they were to make a move now, they would only be able to earn some useless reputation. In fact, there was not much meaning to it. However, Ming Qi was his master uncle and Zhong Xian's elder. Since he had spoken, Zhong Xian would not refuse as long as it did not affect the overall situation. With a step forward, the Buddha light around Zhong Xian had condensed to the extreme, making him look like a god or a demon. The Wisdom King seal fell, but this time it was not an ordinary Wisdom King seal. It was the Wrath Wisdom King seal. The Buddha flame rose and suppressed everything. Chu Xiu, who had stepped into the oneness of heaven and man realm, was completely different from the previous Chu Xiu. Even if they had not officially fought, Zhong Xian could feel the gap between them. Therefore, he used all his strength in this attack. The demonic aura in Chu Xiu's eyes rose, and he also took a step forward. In an instant, demonic flames soared into the sky. Taking another step forward, the blood-refined god aura soared into the sky, transforming into a blood-colored blade that coiled around the blade. Taking the third step, Chu Xiu's body was completely enveloped in a killing intent. Entering the selfless killing state, there was nothing in the world that he could not kill. Chu Xiu continuously unleashed his strongest state, stirring the winds and clouds around him. Strands of power passively seeped into Chu Xiu's body. This was a completely different realm. Taisheng Wangqing. This heaven and earth did not have any attributes to begin with. Devils could survive in this heaven and earth, and Buddhas could also shine under the sun. Therefore, how much power of heaven and earth Chu Xiu could draw over depended entirely on how high his compatibility with this heaven and earth was. He was a devil, and this heaven and earth was a devil. As the blade slashed down, boundless evil ghosts wailed, as if the gates of hell had opened, making people feel extremely creepy and evil. At this time, the blade intent of the Avicii three blades had already seeped into Chu Xiu's bones. The incomparably evil blade collided with Zhong Xian's angry Akalanatha seal, and in an instant, a strong wave broke out. The demonic aura and Buddha's flame splashed everywhere, and a series of violent explosions came one after another. The powerful force made everyone's expression change. They had just exchanged blows, but the surrounding ground had already begun to crack, and the entire long street had become a mess. If these two people continued to fight, perhaps a small town would be destroyed by these two people. Amidst the boundless demonic flames, Zhongxian's body was shrouded in Buddha's light. Facing the slash of Chu Xiu's blade aura, he slashed down one after another with the Akalanatha seal, directly and violently colliding with Chu Xiu's blade aura. Chu Xiu's hands did not stop. Under the selfless killing realm, all the gang qi in his body condensed on the blade. The demonic blade slashed wildly, and in an instant he had already slashed out hundreds of times. The sky was filled with demonic aura and blade aura, and it almost covered the sun. The fight between these two people was simple and violent to the extreme. They were completely relying on their own strength to fight head-on. It was just that one was unintentional, while the other was intentional. Zhongxian's fighting style had always been like this, crushing all along the way and extremely powerful. And Chu Xiu was not only good at brute force. At this time, he was only doing this to hone his own realm strength. However, in the collision between the Akalanatha seal and the demonic blade, everyone also discovered that Zhongxian still had the upper hand. Chu Xiu's figure did not retreat, but Zhongxian faced Chu Xiu's blade aura head-on and moved forward. The powerful demonic blade was either shattered by his Akalanatha seal, or he used his body to resist some of the aftershocks, and he did not suffer the slightest injury. Zhongxian was not only terrifyingly strong, but even his physical body was so strong that it was almost abnormal. It was no wonder that Feng Qixiao called Zhongxian a freak. If Chu Xiu's powerful demonic aura blade aura had slashed on other martial artists in the unity of heaven and man realm, that person would probably have been immediately sent flying with blood spurting out of his mouth. The weaker ones might even have been killed directly. But what if it had slashed on Zhongxian? It only left a white mark, and the damage caused to Zhongxian could be said to be negligible. Seeing this scene, Feng Qixiao, who was watching the battle from the crowd, could not help but look serious. Zhongxian's cultivation level was even stronger than before. The first time Chu Xiu fought with Zhongxian, Zhongxian had not used his full strength. It was only now that Zhongxian had revealed his full cultivation level. Zhongxian's reputation in the underworld was based on his Akalanatha seal, which was ever-changing and immeasurably powerful. However, in reality, the Akalanatha seal was not considered a top-notch peerless technique in the Great Light Temple. It could only be considered not bad. However, Feng Qixiao knew that the physique tempering technique that Zhongxian cultivated was one of the strongest among the many physique tempering techniques in the Great Light Temple. It was a peerless technique that surpassed the 9 transformations, the Moonlight King's glazed golden body. Although this technique was a secret peerless technique of the Great Light Temple, it was not very famous in the underworld because very few people could successfully cultivate it. The Moonlight King's glazed golden body was a glazed Light King Buddha form that refined one's body like a weapon. The glazed Light King would evolve the indestructible glazed Pure Land in one's body. When cultivated to the end, one's body would not be indestructible, but it would be like Vajra glazed, impervious to all spells and repelling all evil. Furthermore, the Moonlight King's azure glass golden body had a miraculous healing effect. Even if one were to suffer a serious injury during a battle, with the power of the alchemist Azure Glass Light Buddha Lord, he would be able to recover at the fastest speed possible. Therefore, those who fought with Zhongxian, even if they had the upper hand in the early stages, would definitely be a nightmare in the later stages. However, although this technique was powerful, it had extremely high requirements for the cultivator's aptitude and willpower. It could even be said that it was indispensable. Those with aptitude could not withstand the pain of refining one's body like refining a weapon, and those who could withstand such pain did not have the aptitude. Therefore, in the past 1,000 years, Zhongxian was the only one who could successfully cultivate the Moonlight King's glazed golden body. When Zhongxian faced Chu Xiu, he had already unleashed his physical cultivation to the extreme. He pushed all the way to Chu Xiu, and another Wisdom King seal landed. Its power was unparalleled. The mighty Wisdom King seal. When the seal landed, it was like a 5-fingered mountain crashing down. The pressure it brought to Chu Xiu made it hard for him to breathe. At that moment, Chu Xiu retracted his sword and formed a seal. The sun, moon, and stars rotated in his eyes. He had unleashed the heaven sun gazing at air to its extreme, but it was still useless. Was Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal really flawless? Otherwise, under Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air, he could see several loopholes, but it was still useless. Even if Chu Xiu attacked these loopholes, in the face of absolute power, he would still be unable to defeat Zhongxian's Wisdom King seal. And if he wanted to escape, Zhongxian's aura had already sealed off all escape routes for Chu Xiu. As long as Chu Xiu retreated and escaped, Zhongxian's attack would definitely pour down. Therefore, Chu Xiu could only face it head-on. The Wisdom Fist seal exploded. Earth energy condensed and covered the sky. But under Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal, the Wisdom Fist seal was directly shattered. Instead of retreating, Chu Xiu advanced. The perfect Aquarius seal, the Great Vajrawheel seal, and the Sunwheel seal came crashing down. 3 seals were unleashed consecutively, and the power of the 3 seals stacked together to collide with Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal. With a loud explosion, a pit of over 30 meters was blasted under the feet of the 2 of them. Even the soil was turned into dust by the powerful earth energy storm. A huge force attacked, and Chu Xiu could not help but feel a sharp pain in his arm. The web between his thumb and forefinger split open, and blood spilled out. In terms of power, even if Chu Xiu had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, he was still inferior to Zhongxian. The effect of the Great Vajra divine powers and body tempering techniques was not bad, but it was just not bad. On the other hand, the Lunar Treasure Light King Azure Golden Body that Zhongxian cultivated was a peerless technique that surpassed the 9 transformations. Even in the Great Light Temple, it was a top-notch existence. The difference between the 2 was not small. Just as Zhongxian's eyes were full of Buddha's light, and he was about to attack again, Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly turned into a dark abyss. It was boundless, and it swallowed Zhongxian's Buddha's light, instantly pulling him into it. In an instant, countless ferocious evil spirits bit and pulled at Zhongxian from under his feet, as if they wanted to pull him into the abyss of the netherworld. Besides Zhongxian, there were countless pink mists surrounding him, and there were Azura goddesses dancing. They were naked, and their expressions were enchanting and extremely seductive. In the sky, there were countless gods and Buddhas that appeared, glaring at Zhongxian angrily. They scolded him for deceiving his master, destroying his ancestors, and not respecting the precepts. These illusions were like a dream, and it was impossible to tell what was real and what was fake. This move was a spiritual illusion created by Chu Xiu's combination of the great art of mental demons rotation and the great art of extinguishing earth extinguishing and soul shifting. The great art of mental demons rotation used mental energy to attack the opponent's heart and break their state of mind, which was evil and strange. On the other hand, the great art of extinguishing earth extinguishing and soul shifting used mental energy to forcefully invade the opponent's mind, which was overbearing and ruthless. At this moment, Chu Xiu combined the 2 together. While it affected Zhongxian's state of mind, it was also eroding his mental energy. Chapter 474. Among the techniques that Chu Xiu possessed, the Great Inner Demon Rotation Technique and the 9 forms of Soul Catcher were the ones that Chu Xiu was unwilling to reveal in front of outsiders. After all, these 2 techniques were authentic Kunlun devil cult martial arts. Although very few people knew about them, Chu Xiu could not guarantee that no one would be able to recognize them. Right now, Chu Xiu's identity and his identity as a member of the Kunlun demon sect were both in the light and in the dark. Chu Xiu didn't wish to reveal his identity so early on. Therefore, Chu Xiu rarely used these 2 techniques. Even if he did, he would only choose a martial art that did not have obvious external characteristics. Just like the silk soul net that Chu Xiu had used when he schemed against Iron Sword sect's Zheng Qingyong. Its external characteristics were not obvious. This great inner demon rotation technique, which was directly combined with the great soul shifting technique of extinguishing heaven and extinguishing earth, was the same. Other than Zhongxian himself, outsiders would not be able to see any special characteristics. At that moment, in the boundless illusion, the Buddhist light in Zhongxian's eyes dimmed. He really did not expect this move from Chu Xiu. All along, when Chu Xiu fought with him, the martial arts that he had displayed leaned towards the fierce and overbearing type. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would actually use such an evil primordial spirit secret technique? Given Zhongxian's character, He would not even bother to understand information about Chu Xiu. It should be said that Zhongxian would not understand any opponent's information. Moreover, even if he knew that Chu Xiu was proficient in primordial spirit secret techniques, so what? In any case, for Zhongxian, no matter what he faced, there was only one way to deal with it, and that was to directly crush it. Zhongxian's hands formed a strange hand seal. Compared to the fierce and imposing Wisdom King seal, this hand seal actually gave off an extremely gentle feeling. In an instant, the Buddhist light in Zhongxian's eyes shone brightly again. Behind him, an illusion of the medicine-glazed light Buddha Lord appeared, sitting on a lotus platform with a solemn expression. Break. Zhongxian calmly spat out a single word. In an instant, a boundless power of blood and qi shot up into the sky. The reason why Essence Spirit Mystic techniques were strange was that there were very few ways to deal with Essence Spirit Mystic techniques. Either you were proficient in Essence Soul Mystic arts to begin with, then you could withstand the collision head-on. Otherwise, he would completely rely on his own powerful vital energy and blood to deal with the impact of the Essence Soul Mystic technique. Those with strong qi and blood would have stable and resolute psyche power. Naturally, they would have a strong resistance to psyche power impacts. This was also the reason why some of the evil creatures in the forest would often find some thin and weak ordinary people, and not some martial arts experts. However, using such a method to deal with Essence Soul Mystic arts could only be described in one word: forcefully resisting. He could only passively defend, unable to counterattack. But now Zhongxian was telling everyone that when one's vital qi and blood reached a certain level, it could also counteract one's spiritual power. Just like what was happening right now. As the power of blood and blood burst forth, those evil ghosts were all smashed into smithereens. The Shura goddess wailed in anguish and dissipated. Even the gods and Buddhas that filled the skies let out cries of indignation before finally disappearing. Taking another step forward, the darkness before him was torn apart. Zhongxian didn't even bother to take a look as he sent out yet another bright ruler seal. Zhongxian's prediction was right. The moment Chu Xiu pulled Zhongxian into that illusion, he had already decided to strike. Chu Xiu didn't choose to use his full strength to activate that illusion. This was because he knew that against an existence of Zhongxian's level, even if he used his full strength, it would be useless. He might as well use it to delay the other party for a period of time. In reality, that was indeed the case. That illusion didn't even delay Zhongxian for a breath's time before it was broken by him. But to Chu Xiu, this was enough. At this instant, Buddha's light shone brightly around Chu Xiu, and a Vairocana Dharma form appeared behind him. As Chu Xiu formed hand seals, his figure and the Vairocana Dharma form became more and more compatible. Chu Xiu placed his right hand in front of his chest, forming the fearless seal. His Dharma form was solemn. In an instant, endless light bloomed. The blood in Chu Xiu's body seemed to be boiling, burning with a scorching Buddha's flame. It turned into the power of Vairocana Dharma form, and released countless Buddha's light that shrouded Zhongxian. Sun-changing technique. Seizing the fortune of heaven and earth. Stealing the sky and changing the sun. Its power was limitless. Moreover, this sun-changing technique wasn't the original version of the sun-changing technique. Instead, it was the sun-changing technique that Master Tam Yuan had developed after comprehending and evolving it. Now that he had been imparted by Master Tam Yuan, Chu Xiu could use 80% of the power of the sun-changing technique. Therefore, while its power was strong, Chu Xiu almost couldn't control this powerful technique. Bathed in the endless Buddha's light, Zhongxian's Wisdom King seal shattered for the first time. This was the first time it was shattered by Chu Xiu head-on. Raising his head to look at the Vairocana Dharma form that was shining with resplendent Buddha's flame, Zhongxian chose to be on the defensive for the first time. The Buddha's light around him dissipated, and in its place, a cold moonlight appeared. The alchemist Vairocana light Buddha's Dharma form appeared behind him. It was much clearer than the Vairocana Dharma form behind Chu Xiu. Amidst the flawless moonlight, the alchemist Vairocana light Buddha's Dharma form formed a dhyana seal. A strange power was emitted. It wasn't earth qi, but it wasn't heaven and earth energy either. However, this power circled around Zhongxian's body, causing the Vairocana light Buddha's sun-changing technique to shine even brighter. It was actually going against Chu Xiu's sun-changing technique. One was the sun, and the other was the moonlight. However, neither of them gave way. At the side, Ming-Chi's eyes flashed with anxiety when he saw this. He had never imagined that Chu Xiu would actually become so powerful after obtaining Master Tan Yuan's inheritance. He was actually able to fight with Zhongxian to such an extent. This caused Ming-Chi to be unable to help but become anxious. Zhongxian couldn't lose. To the Great Light Temple. Zhongxian was the face of the Great Light Temple. There were many young talents in the world who respected Taoism and Buddhism. Other than Zhang Qingjin of the Celestial Master's abode, Zhongxian couldn't lose to anyone, let alone Chu Xiu, who was several ranks lower than Zhongxian. This time, the Great Light Temple only wanted to obtain Master Tam Yuan's legacy and make a fuss in the East Sea. However, the one who made Zhongxian attack Chu Xiu was Ming-Chi. If anything happened to Zhongxian this time, he would be the one to be severely punished when he returned to the Great Light Temple. Ming-Chi gritted his teeth. A weak Buddha's light bloomed in his hands. His 10 fingers formed various hand seals and he quickly deduced. This was the Great Light Temple's triple reincarnation's future scripture. It was said that when cultivated to its peak, one could even deduce the future of 3 lifetimes. In theory, it was similar to Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air. However, Chu Xiu's sun gazing at air was a secret scripture of Taoism. Its main use was still in combat. It could only see what was in front of one's eyes and could not see other futures. It could not be used for divination, but at the same time, the speed of the sun gazing at air far exceeded that of the triple reincarnation's future scripture. There was no need for such complicated hand seals to deduce. At this time, Ming-Chi was using all his strength to deduce the flaws on Chu Xiu's side. He was prepared to intervene later. Zhongxian's expression had always been like that of a statue. Ming-Chi couldn't tell if he had the upper hand or if he wasn't. So for safety's sake, even if others said that Ming-Chi's sneak attack was shameless, he still had to intervene. But at this moment, a beam of sword chi blasted behind him, giving Ming-Chi a huge fright. It also interrupted Ming-Chi's deduction. Ming-Chi looked behind him and saw Fang Qi-Xiao, who was holding a wine pot and looking like he was watching the show. He could not help but say angrily, "Fang Qi-Xiao, what is the meaning of this?" Fang Qi-Xiao spread his hands and said, "It's fair. They're fighting so well, so why do you have to intervene? If you have the time, why don't you deduce if you will be punished when you return to the Great Light Temple? That way, you can be prepared." Ming-Chi was so angry that his eyebrows twitched. He shouted in a low voice, "Fang Qi-Xiao, the Great Light Temple has no enmity with you. And Chu Xiu also has enmity with your Sword King city. Are you crazy? Why are you helping Chu Xiu?" Fang Qi-Xiao shook his head with a serious expression and said, "I'm not helping Chu Xiu. I'm just watching the show. You can't interrupt such a wonderful show. This is a warning. Next time, I'd like to see if your triple lifetimes future sutra is faster, or if my karma sword path is faster." It was rare for Fang Qi-Xiao to be serious. Although he seemed to be looking for an excuse, he was actually telling the truth. He was really watching the show. As the third person on the Longhu list, Fang Qi-Xiao had fought with Zhongxian before. However, he had been at a disadvantage. Perhaps it was because he wanted to save face, or perhaps it was because he was not confident. Fang Qi-Xiao almost never fought with Zhongxian again after he was at a disadvantage. However, Zhongxian had used his full strength when he fought with Chu Xiu this time. Watching their fight would be beneficial to Fang Qi-Xiao, who was in the same realm as them. Therefore, he could not let Ming-Chi ruin everything. When Ming-Chi saw Fang Qi-Xiao's expression, he was so angry that his face turned red. However, he did not dare to make another move. Ming-Chi knew how terrifying Zhongxian was, and it was needless to say how terrifying Fang Qi-Xiao, who was only one rank lower than Zhongxian, was. While Chu Xiu and Zhongxian were still in a stalemate, a sigh was heard from the inn. "Sigh, let's stop. Everyone from the Great Light Temple. I was the one who chose my successor. I'm already so old. Don't tell me I don't even have the right to choose my own successor?" Master Tam Yuan walked out of the inn slowly with a helpless look on his face. He had thought that since Chu Xiu had appeared, it meant that the inheritance had been completed, and the people from the Great Light Temple would retreat. However, he did not expect them to still want to make a move. It had been a long time since he stepped into the Central Plains, and the Great Light Temple had become completely different from what he remembered. Perhaps Master Tam Yuan had never really understood what the Great Light Temple was, because at that time, he did not have the right to come into contact with the real Great Light Temple with his abilities and status. Chapter 475. As Master Tam Yuan spoke up, Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian could no longer continue fighting. After all, Master Tam Yuan was about to die. If the Great Light Temple were to force him to take back the technique that he had passed to Chu Xiu, it would be too much. Hence, Ming Qi could only pinch his nose and say, "Zhong Xian, stop fighting. Stop." However, this time, Zhong Xian did not listen to Ming Qi's order to stop immediately. Instead, his eyes shone brightly, and he only stopped after a while. Feng Qishao, who was at the back, stroked his chin. After Chu Xiu entered the unity of heaven and man realm, his combat power was not weak at all. He could actually force Zhong Xian into a serious state. However, it was obvious that Chu Xiu had lost this round. After Zhong Xian retracted his hand, the radiance of the sun around Chu Xiu also dissipated. However, his face had already turned pale. The power of the sun-changing technique was not something that Chu Xiu could use as he wished. If he did not control the power of the sun-changing technique well, he would only end up hurting himself and others. Meanwhile, on Zhong Xian's side, he had only just started to get serious. If Master Tam Yuan did not show up, the person who would lose in the end would still be Chu Xiu. Ming Qi's expression was a little ugly as he cupped his hands at Master Tam Yuan and said, "Master Tam Yuan, you're the publicly recognized holy monk of the Buddhist sect. We naturally can't control who you want to pass the technique to. However, this Chu Xiu has a ferocious reputation. If he were to use the cultivation technique you taught him to do something evil in the future, then the karma will be placed on you, and it will ruin your reputation in the future. I'm doing this for your own good." Master Tan Yuan smiled and said, "This old monk appreciates the kindness of the Temple of Great Light, but let's talk about the future in the future. Karma is such a complicated thing, so how can you and I see through it now? As for my reputation, the so-called title of holy monk is also something that was forcefully added because of everyone's love for me. It doesn't matter if it's ruined. At that time, I'm afraid this old monk will already be a pile of bones. Would I still need to care about my reputation?" Hearing Master Tam Yuan's words, Ming Qi could only put on a gloomy expression as he reluctantly cupped his hands to bid farewell and turned to leave. Seeing Ming Qi's attitude, Chu Xiu couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The Temple of Great Light was really used to being domineering. They actually sent such a person over. They were simply asking for trouble. Although Master Tan Yuan was alone, he still had the reputation of a holy monk. Not only was he recognized by Buddhism, but he was also a holy monk recognized by the entire martial arts world. The Temple of Great Light could be domineering to others, but to be so domineering to a person like Master Tam Yuan, who was about to die, was basically ruining their own reputation. This Ming Qi came from the Temple of Great Light's Karma Hall. Forget about the martial arts world. Even in the Temple of Great Light, the Karma Hall's status was very high. It could even be said that in the Temple of Great Light, although the Karma Hall's combat power was not the strongest, their status was extraordinary. If the Temple of Great Light had only sent Ming Qi, it would have been fine. But in the end, they sent Zhong Xian, who was stubborn and did not know how to be flexible. In the end, it was not surprising that things had escalated to such a state. After Zhong Xian and Ming Qi left, Master Tam Yuan walked towards Long Tianying and the others. He sighed and said, "President Long, I've implicated you." Long Tianying hurriedly shook his head and said, "Don't say that, Master. It's just a small matter. Not to mention that we only suffered some minor injuries. Even if we had to risk our lives to stop the people from the Temple of Great Light, it would be worth it." Master Tam Yuan shook his head and said, "I'm already at the end of my rope, but President Long, you're still young. Don't talk about dying. Now that my wish has been fulfilled, I'm ready to return to my hometown. President Long, please go back." Long Tianying hurriedly shook his head and said, I won't forget the kindness you've shown me in the past. The development of the Cetacean Society is already on the right track. It's fine for me to be away for a while. I hope Master can let me send you on your last journey. Hearing Long Tianying say that, Master Tam Yuan did not stop him. He only turned around to look at Chu Xiu and said, Chu, I haven't been to the Central Plains for a long time. Can I trouble you to send me back to my hometown? Chu Xiu nodded and said, It's my duty. Although he had obtained the cultivation method by deceiving Master Tam Yuan, Chu Xiu naturally would not refuse such a request. Just as Master Tam Yuan was about to leave, he suddenly saw Feng Qi Xiao, who was also about to leave with a flagon of wine. Master Tam Yuan suddenly asked, Young friend, please wait a moment. May I ask if you're from Sword King City? Feng Qi Xiao said somewhat gloomily. Yes, what orders do you have for me, Master? Just now he had represented Sword King City in the crowd to present a gift to Master Tam Yuan. However, it seemed like Master Tam Yuan did not remember anything. Perhaps he had never paid attention to him from the beginning. To think that he, the dignified sword leader 7th young Master Feng, would one day be ignored by others. This was not a good feeling. Master Tam Yuan seemed to have seen through Feng Qi Xiao's thoughts. He smiled and said, Please don't blame me, young friend. When I came ashore, this old monk was focused on inheriting my martial arts. Because I don't have much time left, I was a bit anxious and didn't care about other things. Hearing Master Tam Yuan's words, Feng Qi Xiao felt a little embarrassed. He waved his hand and said, I don't blame you, Master. Smiling, Master Tam Yuan took out a jade slip from his bosom and handed it to the 7th young master. This is a secret manual of the way of the sword that I obtained by accident. It is a manual left behind by a large sect of the way of the sword in the Eastern Sea thousands of years ago. There are only a few scattered sword techniques, but there is no complete sword technique. However, there are even more comprehensions left behind by the experts of the large sect. I believe that this thing will be very useful to you. 7th young Master Feng took the jade slip with a surprised look on his face. This thing was more than useful to him. It was simply a treasure. For Feng Qi Xiao, who came from Sword King City, he did not lack sword arts. His karma sword Dao did not need those messy sword arts. However, he could use other people's knowledge to improve himself. Things like sword practice experiences left behind by these ancient powerhouses were the most precious. After reading these things, it would definitely bring another level of understanding to his entire sword Dao. Feng Qi Xiao asked hesitantly, Master, why are you giving me this thing? Master Tam Yuan smiled freely and said, I've obtained a lot of good things in the Eastern Sea over the years. I've already given what I can to others. Now that I'm about to pass away, these things can't be brought with me when I'm alive, and I can't take them with me when I die. It's useless for me to keep them. Little friend, you came from Sword King City. This thing will definitely be much more valuable to you than to be buried with an old man like me. Compared to other martial artists, who viewed their martial arts inheritance as incomparably important, to the point that even if they died, they would take it with them to the underworld. Master Tan Yuan's view of martial arts was much more open-minded, and he even viewed it as an external object. Feng Qi Xiao asked in surprise, Master, aren't you afraid that I'll do something evil after obtaining this thing and destroy it? After saying that, Feng Qi Xiao glanced at Chu Xiu. He didn't think that Chu Xiu was a good person. Ming Qi's words actually made sense. Master Tam Yuan shook his head and said, I've said it before. Good and evil can't be judged on the surface. If a person wants to do evil, even if he doesn't have the slightest bit of strength, he can slaughter millions of people with just his mouth. Similarly, some people seem to kill a lot of people, but they can save even more people. Therefore, this old monk might as well bet that little friend won't let this old monk down. This sword arts record will definitely be more cost-effective to give to the descendants of the 5 great sword sects than to be buried with this old monk. There were so many experts in Jianghu, but there weren't many who could be as open-minded as Master Tan Yuan. This was also because Master Tan Yuan really didn't have the time. Otherwise, he would definitely find a suitable person to hand over all the things he had on him. At this moment, Feng Qi Xiao also became serious for once. He put the sword back on his back and bowed to Master Tam Yuan. Thank you, Master. After a pause, Feng Qishao added, I dare not forget your kindness in teaching me. I'll go with you to send you on your last journey, Master. Master Tam Yuan did not stop him. He just nodded and said, That's good too. The more the merrier. I didn't expect so many people to send me off before I die. Master Tam Yuan's hometown was Songping Prefecture in eastern Qi's Changyang County. It was located in the hinterland of eastern Qi, and was more than 10 days away from Donghai County. And now, Master Tam Yuan's body was about to decay. He might not even be able to hold on for more than 20 hours, let alone 10 days. But perhaps Master Tam Yuan's obsession to see his hometown again. Master Tam Yuan managed to hold on for more than 10 days. Finally, he arrived at a dilapidated temple outside Songping Prefecture, Xuanji Temple. Xuanji Temple was just a small temple. Even when Master Tam Yuan was still alive, there were only a dozen monks in Xuanji Temple. But now all the monks had left, and there was not a single person left. It was either destroyed, or the temple had no successor and had completely withered. But looking at the well-preserved appearance of the temple, it should be the latter. Touching the dusty Buddha statue in Xuanji Temple, Master Tam Yuan let out a long sigh. He traveled to the east in his middle age and returned at the end of his life. He had experienced countless storms. For Master Tam Yuan, he had experienced hardships and confusion in his life, but he had never regretted it. When he first came to the East Sea, he might have only wanted to spread Buddhism and promote the name of Buddhism. But in the end, those superficial meanings disappeared. Everything Master Tam Yuan did had nothing to do with Buddhism. It was just his belief. Sitting on the dirty futon in front of the Buddha statue, Master Tam Yuan closed his eyes. In an instant, the seven-colored light of Buddha shrouded Master Tam Yuan. A majestic power bloomed and drifted between heaven and earth, as if Master Tam Yuan had really become a Buddha. But at this time, Long Tianying's eyes were red. Feng Qishao and Chu Xiu were also silent. This was not becoming a Buddha, but returning to the dust. Warriors were born between heaven and earth and refined the qi of heaven and earth into their bodies. Now that they had passed away, this power naturally had to be returned to heaven and earth. In the 69th year of Yonghe in eastern Qi, holy monk Tan Yuan passed away in Xuanji Temple in Songping Prefecture. He was born here and died here. Chapter 476. After Master Tam Yuan passed away, it was Chu Xiu and the others who buried Master Tam Yuan. Generally speaking, the martial artists of the Great Guangming Temple were used to leaving behind Saraira after they passed away. Not only did they want to be worshipped by their descendants, but they also wanted to integrate their own strength into the Saraira, so that they could use the last bit of strength for their disciples. Tan Yuan did not have a disciple. Although Chu Xiu and Feng Qishao had received Master Tam Yuan's cultivation method, it could only be considered as teaching and not preaching. Therefore, Master Tam Yuan did not leave behind any Saraira, but directly dispersed all the strength in his body, returning to the Eastern Sea. After Long Tianying completed the funeral in grief, he cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu and Feng Qishao and said, Young Hero Feng, young Master Chu, I have already completed the task of sending Master Tam Yuan home. Next, I will return to the Eastern Sea. The two of you will take your leave. Chu Xiu nodded and said, Take care, President Long. In the future, if there is anything you need from me, Chu Xiu, please do not hesitate to ask. If I can help, I will absolutely not decline. Long Tianying was a person who valued friendship. This was something that Chu Xiu could see. Of course, Chu Xiu wanted to make friends with Long Tianying not only because he valued friendship, but also because Long Tianying had the ability, which might be useful in the future. Although the Cetacean Society was far away in the overseas land, they still had to trade with the Central Plains. Not to mention their strength, but their financial strength was not weak. Long Tianying thanked Chu Xiu and directly left. He had a good impression of Chu Xiu. At least, Chu Xiu did not turn his back on him after obtaining the power of inheritance. He was not as unbearable as the rumors of Jianghu made him out to be. But even so, Long Tianying would only befriend Chu Xiu instead of helping Master Tam Yuan for free. Chu Xiu was only the successor of Master Tam Yuan's cultivation method, not Master Tam Yuan's disciple. Therefore, with the death of Master Tam Yuan, the kindness of the past naturally ended, and it was impossible for it to be passed on to Chu Xiu. After Long Tianying left, looking at Master Tam Yuan's grave in front of him, Feng Qishao suddenly sighed and said with a rare serious expression, "Brother Chu, what do you think people live for?" I felt that Master Tam Yuan was at a disadvantage. It's not a problem for an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm to live for more than 400 years. But now, Master Tam Yuan is only 100 years old, and he's already buried. Is it worth it to exchange his 300 years of lifespan for the lives of those people? If he didn't die, he might be able to save more people. Chu Xiu looked ahead, narrowed his eyes and said, "Sometimes, accounts can't be calculated like this. Only when you have a thought in your heart can you achieve something. 10,000 years is too long, and some people would rather seize the day." For Master Tam Yuan, he didn't regret what he did in the past 100 years. It was worth it. If you ask people what they live for, everyone's answer is different. But if they die without regrets, then it's worth it. What about you? Have you thought clearly about what you live for in this life? Feng Qishao was stunned by Chu Xiu's question. He looked at the sword in his hand without blinking. The usually talkative Feng Qishao was actually silent for a long time. After a quarter of an hour, Feng Qishao faintly said, "What do I live for? I should be living for the sake of living. Do you feel that I talk a lot?" Chu Xiu didn't speak. Feng Qishao didn't talk a lot, but he talked a lot. But Feng Qishao didn't wait for Chu Xiu to answer and continued, "I talk a lot every day, even to the point that my senior brothers and junior brothers in Sword King City are impatient. That's because I'm afraid. I'm afraid that one day I'll die and I won't be able to talk so much. In fact, I was very miserable when I was young, so miserable that I almost didn't have the chance to talk. You know the Western regions. Big countries are at war, small countries are at war, and bandits are everywhere. When I was 5 years old, my village was slaughtered by bandits. I hid in a water jar and escaped everything. Later, the bandits left, but I still didn't dare to come out of the water jar. It wasn't until 3 days later when I couldn't stand the hunger anymore that I crawled out. But no one in the entire village could talk. That was the first time I was so close to death. Since then, I didn't like the darkness and silence. As long as I can bathe in the sunlight every day and live, I'm satisfied." Chu Xiu looked at Feng Qishao with a surprised expression. If Feng Qishao hadn't told him these secrets, only a few people in the pugilistic world would know that his background was so miserable. Similarly, Feng Qishao's requirements were also so low. Most of the martial artists in the pugilistic world fought for fame and fortune. But ever since Chu Xiu met Feng Qishao, he didn't care much about fame and fortune. But now, Chu Xiu knew that it wasn't that Feng Qishao didn't care about fame and fortune, but that in his heart, nothing was more important than living. Only those who had experienced death knew the value of living. In the great terror between life and death, some things were not so important. When he said these things, Feng Qishao's tone didn't contain any sadness, as if he was just narrating a simple story. After that, Feng Qishao smiled at Chu Xiu and said, "Brother Chu, when you asked me these questions just now, I told you all my secrets. What about you? What are you living for in this life?" After thinking for a moment, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "If someone told you from the beginning that your fate was already predestined, would you accept it or resist it?" Feng Qishao was stunned and said, "Are you kidding me? Nothing in this world is predestined from the beginning. If fate really can't be changed, then what's the point of studying the divination masters of Taoism and Buddhism? Anyway, I'm going to die, so I'll just follow fate. Even martial artists like us, if everything is really predestined, then what's the point of cultivating? Find a divination master to tell your fortune. If you don't have any achievements in the future, then no matter how much you cultivate, it'll be a waste of time." Chu Xiu said softly, "Yes, nothing in this world is predestined from the beginning. The saying that man can conquer nature is very cliché. Although no one says it out loud, everyone still does it. You asked me what I'm living for in this life. Even I can't explain it clearly. I just don't want to be imprisoned by fate. I just want to stand at the peak and see the scenery below. Feng Qixiao raised his eyebrows and said, "How high is the peak?" Chu Xiu stared at Feng Qixiao and said in a deep voice, very high, so high that no one can stand higher than me." Feng Qixiao also stared at Chu Xiu. He finally realized that he and Chu Xiu were really two different kinds of people. Chu Xiu's ambition was bigger than others could imagine. However, right at this moment, seventh young master Feng revealed a trace of a smile and broke the heavy atmosphere. He chuckled and said, "Brother Chu, the higher you stand, the more miserable your fall will be. You have to consider this carefully." Chu Xiu said lightly, "Falling from the peak is not scary. What's scary is that you don't even have the qualifications to stand at the peak and fall." Feng Qixiao shrugged his shoulders. Although he spoke more than Chu Xiu, it was a pity that he didn't know how to respond to Chu Xiu's words. "That's right, Brother Chu. After you bury Master Tam Yuan, are you preparing to return to the Guanzhong torture room?" Feng Qixiao changed the topic and asked. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "The Guanzhong torture room is fine for now. I've already come out, so I'm not in a rush to go back. I'm preparing to go to West Chu to see a friend before returning to the Guanzhong torture room." The plan to go to West Chu was something Chu Xiu had thought about on the way here. Simply put, he was going to West Chu for Lu Fengxian. But Chu Xiu was going to find Lu Fengxian, not just to catch up with Lu Fengxian, but rather to help Lu Fengxian obtain the ancient demon god Lu Wenho's inheritance. In the original plot, the place where Lu Fengxian obtained the inheritance was in West Chu, around this time period. Although there was Chu Xiu's interference and Lu Fengxian still returned to West Chu, whether or not he would come was still a variable. Therefore Chu Xiu, who had just said that man could conquer nature, was now hoping that the future had not changed. Of course it was not a big deal even if it changed. With the power that Chu Xiu had now, in his previous life, Lu Fengxian could rely on herself to obtain Lu Wenho's inheritance. Now with Chu Xiu's help, the chances were much higher. Those famous characters in the future, they either climbed up step by step, or they obtained some kind of opportunity and directly soared into the sky, becoming a dragon. Lu Fengxian's opportunity to become a dragon was in Lu Wenho's inheritance. Of course, even if Lu Fengxian did not have this inheritance, his strength was not weak enough to compete with the disciples of those large sections. Only cultivation methods were an innate factor. The further one went, the greater the gap would be. If Lu Fengxian could obtain Lu Wenho's inheritance, then this gap would be completely closed. There were very few people who used halberd as a weapon in Jianghu, and those who could use halberd to its peak were even fewer. It could be said that Lu Wenho's inheritance was simply prepared for Lu Fengxian. Even if others obtained it, they would not be able to use it to its fullest potential. When Feng Qixiao heard Chu Xiu say this, he suddenly smiled and said, "Brother Chu, how about I come with you? You can go to West Chu to see your friends, and I will also go to West Chu to see the Hai Hildong family's mountain opening ceremony, and join in on the fun." Chu Xiu had a strange look in his eyes when he heard this. Lu Wenho's inheritance was found during the mountain opening ceremony. The so-called mountain opening ceremony was a tradition of the West Chu 10,000 mountains. Most of the West Chu lands were surrounded by wild forests, so some sects or families that lived in the mountains would organize people to cut down forests and open up a part of the forest. In the West Chu 10,000 Great Mountains, there was no telling what kind of danger they would encounter, fierce beasts, or even some unexpected things. So every family would hold a ceremony before they started cutting the forest, commonly known as the mountain opening ceremony. It could be considered a special feature of West Chu. Chapter 477. The opening mountain ceremony was a tradition in West Chu. Basically, all the forces that were close to the 100,000 mountains would do this before they started cutting forests. In fact, it was just a ceremony for peace of mind. In fact, if one wanted to be safe, it was better to take some incense money and ask for a talisman formation from the Taoist Master Mansion in Longhu Mountain, or go to the Great Light Temple to ask for a magic weapon that had been blessed by the Buddha's light. However, this was a ceremony for those small forces, but for the Jialing Dong family, one of the 9 great families, The scale of the opening mountain ceremony was not ordinary, and the interval was very long. It had been over 10 years since the last time the Dong clan held the opening ceremony. During this period of time, the strength of the Dong clan hadn't changed much. Therefore, the Dong clan was preparing to cut down trees and take a gamble. The Dong family, one of the 9 great families, wanted to cut forests, and the scale was not ordinary. It was not something that those small forces could compare to. Moreover, the Dong family would also invite some martial artists who were on good terms to participate and explore a certain area in the 100,000 mountains together. This kind of behavior was similar to gambling. No one knew what was in the deep mountains and dense forests. If they were lucky, they could find some minerals that could bring some profits to the family, or they could find some precious elixirs that could increase the family's strength. The best case was if they found ancient ruins, then the family's power would definitely skyrocket. However, this was only when they were lucky. If they were unlucky, then there was no telling what they would encounter. It would be fine if they encountered evil beasts. For existences like the Jailing Dong family, they could deal with most of the evil beasts. Even if they could not deal with them, they could just look for reinforcements. This was not the ancient times, when ferocious beasts were everywhere and ate people. Nowadays, ferocious beasts were like a moving treasure trove for martial artists. Every part of their bodies was a treasure. What was really difficult was something that one could not predict. For example, the Jailing Dong family had once mistakenly entered a huge ancient killing formation, causing the killing formation to activate. It killed half of the Jailing Dong family of that generation, and even the martial arts master did not manage to escape. Also, the Jailing Dong family had once brought a strange thing out of the 100,000 mountains. No one knew what it was, but the Jailing Dong family had to sacrifice hundreds of lives to get rid of it. Therefore, cutting down forests in the mountains was actually a gamble. Although it was said that one relied on the mountains to survive, the things in the mountains were not easy to deal with. In this generation, the Jailing Dong clan's strength was considered decent among the 9 great clans. Although they were not the top clans, they were at least in the middle. That was why the Dong clan had the intention to take the risk and conquer the mountains and forests. Now that they had found something good, their strength would increase greatly. Even if they encountered any trouble, the Highland Dong clan would be able to handle it with their current strength. However, according to what Chu Xiu knew, this time, the Jailing Dong clan had indeed found something good, but they had also encountered a huge problem. Moreover, that good thing belonged to Lu Fengxian, not the Jailing Dong clan. Moreover, even if the Jailing Dong clan obtained LV Wenho's inheritance, it would be useless. The Jailing Dong clan's martial arts were completely different from LV Wenho's martial arts. Be it the demon god's unparalleled halberd or the 9 heavens fiend golden body, they could not cultivate either, unless the entire Dong clan gave up on their own martial arts and cultivated something else. Chu Xiu was also not interested in the demon god's unparalleled halberd. He had practiced his saber skills for too long. If he changed to another weapon, not only would it be awkward, the effort he put in would not be worth the rewards. However, Chu Xiu was very interested in the demon god's unparalleled halberd. This cultivation technique was originally evaluated to be above the 9 heavens fiend golden body. Because the only person who cultivated it was Lu Fengxian, some details were not clear, so the evaluation of the cultivation technique was based on the lowest. Even this kind of cultivation technique had as many as the 9 heavens fiend golden body. It was most likely to be a supreme cultivation technique or a peerless cultivation technique. In the battle with Zhongxian, Chu Xiu also felt that although his strength was strong, he was not the strongest existence in the same realm. In the past, it was Chu Xiu who used his strength to crush others. However, when he encountered a martial artist like Zhongxian who specialized in physical strength, Chu Xiu was easily crushed by him. Although Chu Xiu didn't plan to walk the same path as Zhongxian, for the current Chu Xiu, it would be perfect to develop himself to the point where there were no shortcomings or loopholes. After deciding to go to West Chu, Fang Qishao also wanted to follow, and Chu Xiu did not stop him. One of the 9 great families, the Jailing Dong family, was going to hold the mountain opening ceremony. The Dong family invited countless people to come and watch the show, so Fang Qishao was not one of them. Chu Xiu planned to win in the chaos, and did not plan to attack by force. However, after Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao left Peace Pine Mansion, Chu Xiu discovered that the news about him had once again spread in the martial world. It was not because he had obtained Master Tam Yuan's inheritance, but because Chu Xiu had stepped into the Longhu ranking's 5th place. Although Master Tam Yuan was a holy monk, he was not famous for his martial arts. Therefore, in the Central Plains, people only knew that Master Tam Yuan was virtuous and was a good person. They knew what Master Tam Yuan had done, so no one cared about Master Tam Yuan's true strength. However, the battle between Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian was quite eye-catching. No one expected that Chu Xiu could fight Zhong Xian to such an extent. Although the battle was interrupted by Master Tam Yuan, everyone could at least confirm that Chu Xiu had the strength to fight Zhong Xian. However, no one knew how far the battle would go. However, based on the strength that Chu Xiu had displayed in that battle, Wind-Sweeping Tower had raised Chu Xiu's ranking by 1 place. He had squeezed out Ying Bailu of the Shangshuaying clan to become the 5th place on the Longhu ranking. In the Longhu ranking, the top 10 had always been a level, and the top 5 had been another level. Although the Longhu ranking could not include all the young talents in the world, it at least represented that Chu Xiu was standing at the peak of the younger generation in the martial world. Of course, there were also many people in the martial world who complained about Ying Bailu. They believed that even if Chu Xiu had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, even if he could fight Zhong Xian for such a long time, he was definitely not as good as Ying Bailu. They believed that Wind-Sweeping Tower's ranking was unfair. Of course, most of the people who did this were women, and young women at that. If one were to talk about who had the best luck with women in the martial world, it would definitely be Ying Bailu. He was strong, had an illustrious family background, was handsome, and was well versed in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Most importantly, Ying Bailu was not dissolute. There were rumors in the martial world that Ying Bailu was in love with the Cloud Sword Fairy of the Yunnu Palace, Yanfian. His infatuation had not changed even after so many years. How could such an outstanding and infatuated man not attract women? However, Wind-Sweeping Tower was one of the 6 sects, and the top 5 of the Longhu ranking were very serious. Of course, they would not listen to a group of women and change the ranking. They directly pretended that they did not hear anything. As for Chu Xiu, because he had squeezed out Ying Bailu's ranking, he had inexplicably made a bunch of enemies. The Shangshuaying clan did not say anything, but a lot of women in the martial world were very hostile towards him. At that moment, in a study room of the Shangshuaying clan, Ying Bailu held a brush in his hand, and was sketching a beauty with his eyes closed. He did not open his eyes because he was showing off his perception, but because the beauty he wanted to draw was not in his eyes, but in his heart. At this moment, the door was pushed open and the martial grandmaster level servant of the Ying clan, Uncle Fu, walked in. Just as he was about to say something, Ying Bailu waved his hand lightly. Uncle Fu immediately understood what was going on, and stood quietly to the side. Ying Bailu was leisurely sketching the figure under his brush. She was dressed in a rainbow-colored feather robe, dancing with a sword in her hand, like a fairy from the 9 heavens. Ying Bailu was drawing Yanfian. After he was done, Ying Bailu looked at his drawing, but shook his head in dissatisfaction. He stretched out his hand and a faint golden energy burst out, directly crushing the drawing to dust. Ordinary paper and brush could not draw the fairy's face. Uncle Fu, did something happen? Or did that white tiger kid cause trouble again? Ying Bailu asked softly. Uncle Fu hurriedly said, "It's not about second young master. Eldest young master, have you heard about the rumors in the pugilistic world? Chu Xiu obtained holy monk Tan Yuan's inheritance, and fought with Zhong Xian of the Great Light Temple. This also caused Wind-Sweeping Tower to move Chu Xiu's ranking on the Longhu leaderboard by 1 place, pushing you down." Ying Bailu nodded indifferently and said, "I know." Uncle Fu was taken aback, then said, "Then eldest young master, are you prepared?" Ying Bailu waved his hand casually and said, "I'm not prepared. It's just a ranking on the Longhu leaderboard. Why should I care so much? I'm ranked 5th, and I'm Ying Bailu. I'm ranked 1st, and I'm still Ying Bailu. Will anyone in the pugilistic world look down on me just because I'm ranked 6th? Uncle Fu, you know me. I don't care about these rankings. If I did, I would have challenged Fang Qishao and Zhong Xian a long time ago. There's no need to mention these things anymore. Outsiders can say whatever they want. Uncle Fu nodded. The eldest young master's breadth of mind was indeed not something an ordinary person could compare to. These things might be a big deal to other young martial artists, but to Ying Bailu, it was really not a big deal. Just as Uncle Fu was about to leave, Ying Bailu suddenly said, "Wait, Uncle Fu. There's something you need to tell father. I'm going to West Chu." Uncle Fu said in surprise, "Eldest young master, why are you going to West Chu? Also, why don't you tell the patriarch yourself?" Ying Bailu said indifferently, "The High Hill Dong family is about to prepare for the mountain opening ceremony. Miss Yen will be representing the Yu Palace to attend the ceremony. Although the Dong family didn't invite me this time, I'm also going. Father doesn't like me being too close to Miss Yen. You should know this. If I tell him, it'll be hard to avoid an argument with father. I don't want to have these meaningless arguments, so you should tell father." Chapter 478. Everyone in the pugilistic world knew that Ying Bailu was in love with Yan Fian, but they didn't know if it was true or just a rumor. However, everyone in the Shangshui Ying clan knew it was true. Because of this, Ying Bailu had even quarreled with his father several times. In fact, in terms of their family backgrounds, strength, and so on, Yan Fian and Ying Bailu could be considered a match made in heaven. If Ying Bailu wanted to marry Yan Fian, the Ying clan of Shangshui would do everything in their power to play matchmaker. However, the problem was that Yan Fian was a disciple of the Yu Palace and the future successor of the Yu Palace. She was destined to become the palace master of the Yu Palace. The rule of the Yu Palace was that women were not allowed to marry outside, let alone the palace master. Even if the other party was Ying Bailu from the Shangshui Ying clan, it was still the same. Therefore, in the Shangshui Ying clan, whether it was Ying Bailu's father or the other elders, they all advised Ying Bailu to change his target. Even if Ying Bailu wanted to marry the moon-worshipping cult saintess, it would be easier than marrying Yan Fian. There was no need to waste time and energy on her. But who knew that Ying Bailu, who had always appeared to be very rational, would be extremely stubborn when it came to the matter of Yan Fian. No matter who tried to persuade him, it was useless. Even now, Ying Bailu had no intention of changing his mind. Uncle Fu hesitated. "Young master, it really is impossible for you and Miss Yan. Even if the patriarch agrees, what will the Yu Palace say? Not to mention that Miss Yan has already rejected you several times." Ying Bailu didn't care and waved his hand. "Everything will sort itself out. There will always be a solution. Uncle Fu, I'll be leaving first. I'll have to trouble you to inform my father." As soon as he finished speaking, Ying Bailu turned around and left without giving Uncle Fu a chance to speak. Looking at Ying Bailu's back, Uncle Fu shook his head. Perhaps there was nothing perfect in this world. The young master was good at everything, but he couldn't see through the word love. It was fate's joke. At this time in the West Chu territory, Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao directly arrived at West Chu through a small path in the southwest. As for why he wanted to go to the southwest, it was purely because Chu Xiu wanted to see what the southwest had become. The result was just as Chu Xiu had expected. There were still some capable people under the second prince's command, and they managed the southwest in an orderly manner. As for what the martial arts sects in the southwest were thinking, Chu Xiu did not know. In any case, no matter how miserable they were, it was still better than being destroyed, wasn't it? After arriving at West Chu, Fang Qishao cupped his hands to Chu Xiu and said, "Brother Chu will be leaving. You can go find your friend. I'll be going to the Jailing Dong family to eat." Seventh young master Fang really meant what he said when he said that he was going to make a living because the Jailing Dong family did not invite Sword King City. However, the Sword King City did not have any enmity with the Jailing Dong family. With the Sword King City's strength and Fang Qishao's identity, even if he did not receive an invitation, he would still receive preferential treatment from the Jailing Dong family. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "It's fine, I believe we will meet soon." Fang Qishao was stunned. Chu Xiu was also going to the Jialing Dong family to participate in the opening ceremony. However, before he could ask more, Chu Xiu had already left. This made Feng Qixiao shake his head, and after muttering a few words, he also turned around and left. Chu Xiu would go to the Jialing Dong family's opening ceremony, but before that, he had to find Lu Fengxian. Speaking of the Jialing Dong family, Chu Xiu had come into contact with the second eldest of the Jiangdong Five Heroes, Dong Xiangyi. Although in theory, Dong Xiangyi was not killed by Chu Xiu, but by the internal strife of the Jiangdong Five Heroes, Chu Xiu could not escape from it. Chu Xiu only hoped that this time when he went to the Jialing Dong family, he would not get into trouble because of this matter. However, according to Chu Xiu's analysis, there should not be any trouble. Dong Xiangyi had left the Jialing Dong family because he had lost in the family power struggle, so he left in a huff. Now there were probably only a few people in the Dong family who still remembered Dong Xiangyi, let alone trouble Chu Xiu because of him. At this time Lu Fengxian should be with Feng Buping, the divine doctor of Jianghu in West Chu, Angry Yama. Feng Buping's medical center was in a valley in Danyang County of West Chu, and he was quite famous in Jianghu. Chu Xiu casually asked around and knew where he was going. It was Chu Xiu's first time coming to West Chu. Among the 3 countries in the world, Eastern Qi occupied the Central Plains, which was the most prosperous and rich. Although Northern Yan was close to the extreme cold in the north, it was not bad. Moreover, the people were fierce and martial arts were popular, which was enough to compete with Eastern Qi, and it would be like this in the future. As for West Chu, it was the weakest of the 3 countries, and it had the smallest population. Even most of West Chu's territory was covered by barren mountains and dense forests, and there were very few large-scale counties and prefectures. When he was in Eastern Qi and Northern Yan, Chu Xiu could just walk on the main road to get to a place quickly, but now that he was in West Chu, he had to go back and forth between small roads, which was very tiring. There were some places where there was not even a proper road. No wonder so many forces in West Chu had the habit of cutting down forests. For them, the surrounding forests were not only a resource, but also a hindrance. Perhaps only the Miao Borders moon-worshipping cult or Dragon Tiger Mountains, Celestial Master Mansion, would have the courage to establish a sect in the remote mountains and forests, not afraid of any fierce beasts. It should be said that even fierce beasts would have to hide from them. Feng Buping's medical center was in the Danyang County's Deadman Valley. The name was very inauspicious, but in fact it was not a good place. It was said that this Deadman Valley was the place where a small family used to live, but that family was massacred and the valley was filled with blood, so this place was called the Deadman Valley. Later, the Deadman Valley was shrouded in miasma all day long. Ordinary people and animals would have a hard time coming out. Even martial artists below Xiantian would have a hard time resisting this miasma, so this place was abandoned. But 10 years ago, when Feng Buping came here, he relied on his medical skills to plant all kinds of exotic flowers and rare herbs here. Not only did he make the miasma disappear, but he also made a name for himself, making the name of Angry Yama resound in Jianghu. When Chu Xiu arrived at the Deadman Valley, this place was not desolate at all, but it was very lively. Most of the martial artists coming and going were here to find Feng Buping for treatment, and there were also some who were simply here to buy medicine. Before Chu Xiu could enter the valley, a short and thin martial artist squeezed his way over and smiled as he cupped his hands and said, "This young master is also here to find Divine Dr. Feng for treatment?" However, Divine Dr. Feng's reputation in the world of martial arts is very big. These people are all here to find him for treatment, and the longest queue is already a year later. However, this little one has been staying outside the Deadman Valley for several years, and I am familiar with Divine Dr. Feng's character. If this young master can take out a little money, I will tell you Divine Dr. Feng's preferences, and guarantee that the consultation fee you take out will be recognized by Divine Dr. Feng. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Guarantee that I will get treatment immediately?" The martial artist immediately shook his head and said, "Of course not, you still have to queue up, but if the thing you take out is not to Divine Dr. Feng's liking, then you don't even have the qualifications to queue up." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. This Feng Buping is really popular to this point, even queuing up depends on his mood. Thinking so, Chu Xiu ignored the martial artist and directly entered the Dead Man Valley. Seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, the martial artist couldn't help but sneer. So it turns out to be a poor ghost. Wait until you eat a loss, then you will regret it. There are many people outside the Dead Man Valley, but there are even more people inside. And most of them are seriously injured to a certain extent. Phone booping's price is not low, and the conditions are harsh, so as long as there is a little hope, most of the martial artists will not come to find him. At the end of the Dead Man Valley are several thatched huts, surrounded by all kinds of strange flowers and plants. One of them is a thin middle-aged man, only at the 5 Cheese origin realm, with 2 strokes of mustache, dressed in a sloppy manner, sitting in front of the thatched hut. When someone comes, he will carefully examine the other party. Those who need to do something will do it. Those who need to take medicine, he will directly prescribe a few doses of medicine, and then throw it to the side of the errand boy for them to deal with. Although his attitude is not good, his actions are very swift. This person is the angry Yama phone booping, known as the divine doctor who can snatch people from the hands of the Yama king. Phone booping's strength is not strong, and Chu Xiu knows that for phone booping, he doesn't need much strength in his line of work. At least, he needs to use strength in places where it is less than the refiners. Of course, don't look at phone booping's weak strength, his status is there. Among the martial artists who come to treat, there are some from some big sects or some who are at the unity of the heaven and man realm, but they are still reprimanded by phone booping like a grandson, not even daring to refute. Just as Chu Xiu wants to directly walk in front of phone booping, some martial artists look at Chu Xiu with a somewhat unfriendly gaze. They have been queuing here for a long time, and some even live outside the Dead Man Valley, waiting for their turn according to the order. In the end, this kid actually wants to cut the line. This is breaking the rules. Therefore, a temperamental martial artist who is at the unity of the heaven and man realm couldn't help but stand up and say, "Hey kid, do you know what the rules are?" Chu Xiu glanced at him, and the aura of the unity of the heaven and man realm slowly bloomed out. It gradually rose, getting stronger and stronger. Finally, the demonic aura and murderous aura seemed to condense into a substance, abnormally terrifying. The martial artist who is at the unity of the heaven and man realm swallowed a mouthful of saliva, turned around, and went back to his position. He didn't even dare to let out a fart. Putting aside the horrifying aura, although he didn't know Chu Xiu, such a young unity of the heaven and man realm martial artist, needless to say, the background of such a background must be shocking. Finding trouble with such a person is simply courting death. Chapter 479. Chu Xiu walked straight towards phone booping. This caused phone booping to frown, then he coldly snorted and said, "Brat, no matter which sect you come from, since you're here, you must abide by my rules. If you want to cure me, then take out a satisfactory consultation fee, and then scram to the back of the queue." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Dr. Feng, don't be so agitated. Do I look like I'm sick? I'm here to look for someone." Phone booping glanced at Chu Xiu. With just one glance, Chu Xiu felt as if his entire body was being seen through. This was a very strange feeling. There was no danger at all. Therefore, Chu Xiu didn't even subconsciously resist. When Chu Xiu wanted to mobilize the qi in his body, the feeling disappeared in an instant. Phone booping nodded and said, "That's right, your qi and blood are strong and your qi is deep. You're as strong as a flood dragon. There's nothing wrong with you. Who are you looking for?" At this time, Lu Fengxian came out from the back and saw Chu Xiu. He was pleasantly surprised and said, "Brother Chu, why are you here?" Phone booping looked at Chu Xiu in surprise and said, "You're Chu Xiu?" Phone booping and Lu Fengxian were close friends. Naturally, he knew about Chu Xiu's existence. Among the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger list, there weren't many martial artists who came from the bottom. For Chu Xiu to be ranked 5th, this was already a legend. Chu Xiu cupped his hands towards Phone booping and said, "Yes, I came to pay a visit. I hope Dr. Feng doesn't take offense." After saying that, Chu Xiu turned to Lu Fengxian and said, "Of course there's a good thing that I'm looking for you. Moreover, it's a very good thing." Phone booping knew that the two of them might have something to say, so he waved his hand and said, "You two go inside and talk. I'm very busy here, Don't worry about me. Following Lu Fengxian to the back room, Lu Fengxian smiled and said, Brother Chu, what good news do you have for me? Could it be that Brother Chu has become the successor of the Guanzhong torture room and is looking for me to be the torturer? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, You rejected Chen Qingdi's offer to take you into the World Alliance. How could you fancy the Guanzhong torture room? I came to find you because I'm prepared to seize an opportunity together. There's a cultivation technique inside that is very suitable for you. It should be said that it was prepared for you. Lu Fengxian asked directly, When? Lu Fengxian was a trusting person, but he wasn't a fool. Even if he trusted someone, there was a degree of trust. If it was someone else, Lu Fengxian wouldn't refuse. However, he would ask in detail what the opportunity was, how dangerous it was, how the other party knew about it, and so on. But facing Chu Xiu, Lu Fengxian knew that Chu Xiu wouldn't harm him, so he only needed time to prepare. And because Chu Xiu knew Lu Fengxian's character, he didn't make up any excuses, because he knew that Lu Fengxian wouldn't ask too many questions. There's still time. 1 month later, the Jailing Dong family's mountain opening ceremony will be held. We can enter with the Dong family. By the way, Brother Lu, how are your injuries? LV Fengxian stretched her body and said, Divine Physician Feng's miraculous hands can bring me back to life. My injuries can only be healed with time if placed elsewhere, but in Divine Physician Feng's hands, I have fully recovered in a month. Chu Xiu felt strange and asked, Then why are you still here? LV Fengxian shook her head and said, I am only here to protect Divine Dr. Feng. Divine Dr. Feng has not been very peaceful during this period of time. I am here to help him block some thieves. Chu Xiu felt strange and asked, There are still people looking for trouble with Feng Buping? Generally, in the pugilistic world, people like Feng Buping, who could save your life, divination masters, refiners, and the like, although they were weak, very few people would look for trouble with them because it wasn't worth it. As cultivators, these kinds of people posed no threat to them. Moreover, they might have a use for them in the future. Therefore, even the disciples of the big sects had to be polite to these kinds of people. Not to mention looking for trouble, they didn't even have time to curry favor with them. Lu Fengxian smiled bitterly. If it was someone else, it would naturally be the same, but you have seen Divine Dr. Feng's character. Even if he is treating an illness and saving a life, his attitude is still the same, and he would often offend people. This also caused many people to dislike Divine Dr. Feng. Their injuries have been healed, but in their hearts, they do not feel the slightest bit of gratitude towards Divine Dr. Feng. Instead, they hate him. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. He could also see that a doctor who could shout at people to get lost naturally had a bad temper. Of course, this could only be attributed to nature. Mo Yezi's temper was also quite strange. But at least he didn't offend people. Instead, he made a lot of connections. Even if he offended the Luo clan, he wasn't afraid. At this moment, there was a sudden commotion outside. This made Lu Fengxian frown and sigh. It's here again. Chu Xiu was confused. Who? Lu Fengxian said helplessly. Someone looking for trouble. You can't handle it? Chu Xiu knew Lu Fengxian's strength. Although Lu Fengxian was only at the 5 Qis unification realm, with his strength he could fight against most of the one with heaven and man martial artists. Could it be that the person looking for trouble was a martial Dao Grandmaster? Lu Fengxian shook her head and said, I can handle it, but that guy's background is a little big. Someone from the top forces in the pugilistic world? Chu Xiu asked. Not a top force, but his master is a martial Dao Grandmaster who cultivates alone. He's the youngest disciple. Hearing Lu Fengxian's words, Chu Xiu immediately understood where the problem was. If the other party was a disciple of a top force, then it could be solved through various connections or other methods. But the disciple of a martial Dao Grandmaster who cultivates alone was very tricky, because such people usually meant that their master must be a very protective existence. Lu Fengxian sighed and said, Even if it's tricky, I have to take care of it. Dr. Feng saved me twice, I can't abandon him. After saying that, Lu Fengxian directly walked out of the door, and Chu Xiu also followed behind her. At this time, outside the door, The herbs that Feng Buping specially planted around him had been trampled and destroyed. Feng Buping's face was gloomy, and he was trembling with anger. A martial artist in his 30s with physical invulnerability cultivation, wearing brocade clothes, looked at Feng Buping and sneered. Bullshit, Dr. Feng, I think you're a Jianghu swindler. In the beginning, I spent so much money to let you help me sort out the chaotic true qi in my body. You said that you could guarantee that I would be safe and sound and recover to my peak. But in the end, I still have a hidden injury. Feng Buping, if you don't give me an explanation for this matter, I'll come and smash your Dead Man Valley every few days, and make your medical center completely shut down. Feng Buping said with a gloomy face. What did I tell you at the beginning? After sorting out the true qi, you can't get close to women for a month. It's you who can't control the thing in your crotch, and now you're blaming me? At that time, I was also blind and coveted the purple gold mysterious ginseng that your master gave me. That's why I spent a whole 2 days to help you sort out your true qi. I didn't expect that you would bite the hand that fed you. Well, I don't want that purple gold mysterious ginseng anymore. Get out of here. The martial artist sneered and said, You don't want it? Then what about my hidden injury? If I don't cure my hidden injury, this matter won't end. Feng Buping roared angrily. At that time, I said that if you break the precepts to get close to women after sorting out your true qi, you'll have to bear the consequences. Now that your true qi has completely torn apart a part of your dantian, even the gods can't save you. How do you want me to cure it? The martial artist said lightly. If you can't cure it, then use something to compensate. Aren't you known as the divine doctor of Jianghu, Feng Buping? Take out your medical book, I'll let others study how to use it to treat myself. As soon as these words came out, Feng Buping's expression suddenly became extremely unsightly. The others also suddenly realized that the martial artist's goal was actually the medical book in Feng Buping's hands. The medical book in the hands of a divine doctor of Jianghu was definitely very valuable. Moreover, this thing was equivalent to a martial artist's martial arts secret book for a martial artist. How could it be casually handed over? This martial artist was simply trying to take it by force and trickery. Among the people of the Dead Man Valley, some people wanted to stand out. After all, this martial artist was causing trouble here, and it was also delaying their time. However, before they could make a move, they were immediately held down by others, who gave them a detailed explanation of this person's identity. This person was a West Chu rogue cultivator expert, Floating Bloodblade Xiao Liandong's disciple, Zhou Bai. Xiao Liandong was famous in the West Chu land for being protective. In the early years, he even went to the Celestial Master Mansion to seek justice because of his disciples' grievances with the Celestial Master Mansion. If the people present wanted to stand out, they wouldn't have to face Zhou Bai, but the protective martial arts grandmaster Xiao Liandong. Zhou Bai looked at Feng Buping calmly, as if he had already eaten him. He knew that there weren't many people in West Chu who would help Feng Buping. This person's temper was too bad. Sometimes, even if he helped people cure their injuries, most people wouldn't appreciate his favor. Some rogue cultivators who wanted to help didn't dare to make a move after knowing his identity. Some disciples of the big sects didn't want to offend Xiao Liandong for Feng Buping after knowing his identity. After all, Xiao Liandong was considered a top figure in West Chu. Feng Buping was just a divine doctor. He wasn't the only divine doctor in the entire world. It wasn't worth offending a martial arts grandmaster for him. At this moment, Lu Fengxian walked out and said in a cold voice, Zhou Bai, you've gone too far. If it wasn't for divine Dr. Feng, not to mention internal injuries, you would already be a cripple. Divine Dr. Feng doesn't even want the purple gold profound ginseng. What else do you want? Zhou Bai sneered. Little Marquis Lu Fengxian? You're currently in the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger ranking. You're quite famous and your future is limitless. I advise you not to get involved in this matter. Otherwise you won't want to know the consequences. Lu Fengxian knew how to repay kindness and always stayed by Feng Buping's side. Zhou Bai knew this, but he wasn't afraid. Lu Fengxian was a rogue cultivator and didn't have any background. Moreover, she was chased out of northern Yan after offending the righteous manner, so there was nothing to worry about. Chapter 480. Zhou Bai's threat made Lu Fengxian very angry. Although Lu Fengxian usually appeared to be very kind, in fact, Lu Fengxian was also not a kind person. In the past, when they were being chased by the memorial hall, Lu Fengxian had killed the most people. Even if it was usually to solve a problem, although Lu Fengxian would reason with people most of the time, if reason didn't work, then it was time to use his halberd. But this time, reason was obviously useless. Moreover, Zhou Bai's identity also forced Lu Fengxian not to make a move. If Lu Fengxian was alone, then he would have already split Zhou Bai in half. But now Feng Buping was still here. If he killed Zhou Bai, then the one who would be implicated would be Feng Buping. Therefore he couldn't make a move on his own. This kind of matter made Lu Fengxian feel very conflicted. Zhou Bai looked at Lu Fengxian calmly. He knew that Lu Fengxian wouldn't dare to make a move. Therefore Zhou Bai directly sneered and said, "Lu Fengxian, I respect you as a young talent on the Longhu list. I don't want to be your enemy, but you'd better not meddle in my affairs. If you should meddle, do it. If you shouldn't meddle, then don't meddle." At this moment, Chu Xiu glanced at Feng Buping. Suddenly his heart moved. He directly stood up and said coldly, "A martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm actually has such a big tone. He simply doesn't know his place. Just because your master is a martial arts grandmaster, you can be so arrogant. Didn't your master teach you how to respect your superiors?" Zhou Bai's face suddenly sank. He said coldly, "Who are you?" "Chu Xiu." As Chu Xiu said these two words lightly, the people present suddenly burst into an uproar. They had never seen Chu Xiu, but they definitely knew Chu Xiu's name. Last time, when Chu Xiu fought against Song Xian, his rank on the Dragon and Tiger rank had risen to the 5th place. This matter had spread through the entire world of martial arts with the change in Wind Sweeping Tower's ranking board, and Chu Xiu's name was once again known by the people. The top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard, and the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard were worlds apart. Most importantly, Chu Xiu was different from Lu Fengxian. Lu Fengxian was alone, but Chu Xiu had the Guanzhong torture room behind him. Everyone who knew the inside story knew that although the Guanzhong torture room was very low-key, its strength was not inferior to a peak power. Its hall master, Guan Xiyu, was famous in the world of martial arts. Even the Xiahou family's master had suffered under Guan Xiyu's hands. Zhou Bai was also surprised why Chu Xiu was here, but he seemed to have heard that Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu were good friends. However, Zhou Bai didn't care. So what if it was Chu Xiu? This was West Chu, not the Guanzhong torture room. Zhou Bai directly said in a cold voice, "The Guanzhong torture room's official Chu. You can show off in the Guanzhong torture room, but in my West Chu, you don't have the qualifications to do so." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I'm not using the identity of the Guanzhong torture room to show off. I just want to tell you one thing. When the weak faces the strong, you must first learn respect. A fox can borrow the tiger's power. A dog can rely on its master's power, but the prerequisite is that there is a tiger behind you and your master by your side. Otherwise, that is seeking death." As soon as his voice fell, a chill suddenly rose from the bottom of Zhou Bai's heart. Before Zhou Bai could do anything, a profound aura erupted from Chu Xiu's body. Chu Xiu's eyes became like 2 deep pools, and powerful spiritual energy immediately pierced into Zhou Bai's mind, taking complete control of his body. This feeling was incomparably terrifying. He clearly had his own consciousness, but his body didn't listen to his orders. It was like his soul had become an outsider. In the back, Lu Fengxian and Feng Buping's expressions changed. Feng Buping didn't know Chu Xiu's personality, and Lu Fengxian didn't think Chu Xiu would make a move this suddenly. Lu Fengxian wanted to say something, but Chu Xiu had already made his move. She saw Zhou Bai's hand explode with astral energy and hit his own dantian, completely crippling his martial arts. After that, he punched his fists against each other, causing both his arms to shatter and twist. His blood splattered all over the ground. White bones could be seen from Zhou Bai's elbow. He maintained a posture of self-mutilation, looking incomparably resolute. However, his eyes were filled with pain and horror. This kind of feeling was extremely evil, and even more so, caused everyone present to shiver even though it wasn't cold. If Chu Xiu had directly crippled Zhou Bai, it would have been fine. But now, Chu Xiu had directly sent a glance at him, and Zhou Bai had actually directly mutilated himself. This kind of feeling was indeed a little too frightening. After Chu Xiu withdrew the soul-shifting technique, Zhou Bai knelt on the ground and let out a mournful howl. It was incomparably terrifying. If Divine Dr. Feng hadn't been there, your cultivation would have been crippled. Now that you know how to be grateful, I will cripple your cultivation. It's fair and reasonable, Chu Xiu said lightly. Zhou Bai's gaze towards Chu Xiu was filled with hatred. He didn't say anything and directly turned around to escape. He didn't even dare to say a word. Since Chu Xiu dared to cripple him, naturally he also dared to kill him. Lu Fengxian sighed behind him and said, "Brother Chu, this is troublesome. Crippling Zhou Bai is fine, but his master Qiao Liandong will definitely come to the Dead Man Valley to cause trouble. I'm afraid that Divine Dr. Feng won't be able to stay here any longer." Chu Xiu didn't say anything. In fact, he deliberately crippled Zhou Bai, and also deliberately lured Qiao Liandong here. He had no enmity with Feng Buping, so he wouldn't deliberately frame him. Chu Xiu just wanted to bring Feng Buping to the Guanzhong torture room. To be more precise, it should be the Guanxi region. With Feng Buping's character, Chu Xiu also didn't intend to make Feng Buping loyal to him and become his subordinate. However, as long as Feng Buping came to the Guanxi region, for Chu Xiu, it would be enough to greatly increase his power. Therefore, when Chu Xiu heard this, he directly said, "Brother Lu, Divine Dr. Feng, you guys have too many concerns in the past. That's why you can let this kind of villain cause trouble again and again. For these kinds of scoundrels, you can only be more ruthless and evil than them to be able to control them. Otherwise, the one who will suffer will always be you. Divine Dr. Feng doesn't need to worry. If you can't stay in West Chu's Dead Man Valley, the world is so big, there are other places to go. My Guanzhong Punishment Hall is located between the three countries, and there are many martial artists from the three countries coming and going. If Divine Dr. Feng is willing to come over, I won't let you suffer in other places. At least in the Guanxi region, I won't let you suffer." Feng Buping's face was gloomy. He sighed and said, "With my character, no matter where I go, I can't avoid offending others. Zhou Bai has repeatedly found trouble with me. I'm afraid that he has already set his eyes on me. This is partly due to his master Qiao Liandong's instructions. If you want to go to the Guanzhong torture room, then go to the Guanzhong torture room. At least you can find a safe place." Actually, even if Chu Xiu didn't do this, Feng Buping still had thoughts of avoiding him. Zhou Bai stirring up trouble every other day had long since made Feng Buping impatient. It was just that Feng Buping was a bit reluctant to part with the various elixirs he had planted in the Dead Man Valley. Now that Chu Xiu had crippled Zhou Bai, he had thoroughly offended Qiao Liandong. This helped him make up his mind to change places. The Guanzhong torture room was not a bad choice. His character was eccentric, and he loved to offend people. If he went to the Guanxi region, although he didn't have any friendship with Chu Xiu, Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu had a friendship. He believed that he would be able to live a more stable life in the Guanxi region. This Divine Dr. Feng was actually a kind person. He didn't think about the dark side of Chu Xiu's actions. He thought that Chu Xiu was standing up for him. Feng Buping sighed and cupped his hands towards the other people present and said, "Everyone, I'm afraid that I can't treat everyone anymore. If there's anyone who wants to continue looking for me for treatment, please come to the Guanzhong region." It could be said that this was one of the rare times that Feng Buping spoke to people in a friendly manner. However, the people present were somewhat dissatisfied. They had queued up with great difficulty until now. In the end, they actually had to go to the Guanzhong region to queue up again. This made the people present secretly curse Zhou Bai and his disciple. It was their greed that forced Divine Dr. Feng to leave. In such a big Dead Man Valley, there were many things that belonged to Feng Buping. They were the elixirs that he had planted here. Some of them that couldn't be transplanted were probably left here. As for those that could be taken away, they were picked by Feng Buping's servants. Chu Xiu handed over the Guanxi punishment officer's token to Feng Buping and said, "Divine Dr. Feng, take this token. As long as you go to the Guanxi region, give it to any of the Guanxi branch's constables. They will open the door for you. As for where you want to practice medicine, it all depends on your mood. Feng Buping received the token and nodded to Chu Xiu with a rare polite attitude and said, "Many thanks, official Chu." After all, in Feng Buping's view, Chu Xiu crippled Zhou Bai to stand up for him. Now that he was willing to give him the token and let him develop in the Guanzhong torture room, he was also helping him. Although Feng Buping's character wasn't good, he still knew that. Just when Feng Buping had finished packing up and was about to leave, a cold and angry voice suddenly came from the entrance of the Dead Man Valley. "You want to leave after crippling my disciple? I'm afraid you're thinking too much." At the entrance of the Dead Man Valley, a middle-aged martial artist wearing a blood-red robe stood there. He was holding a slender Miao Dao in his hand. The blade was dyed red with blood, making it look a bit evil. Seeing this person, some of the martial artists that hadn't left yet were shocked. Zhou Bai's master, Floating Blood Blade Qiao Liandong, he really came. Moreover, it had only been less than half an hour since Zhou Bai had left. This speed was a bit too fast. It was obvious that Qiao Liandong was in the vicinity. It was just that he had not directly interfered in this matter. Those that hadn't left were looking at Chu Xiu and the others with the mentality of watching a show. They were very curious about what Chu Xiu and the others would choose. They definitely wouldn't be able to win if they fought head-on. This was a martial arts master, and even in the West Chu land, Qiao Liandong was a famous expert. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.